All right, we'll call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock, and we'd like to inform all board member attendees that this meeting is being live streamed and archived for access at any time by our community members on the internet within 24 to 48 hours of the meeting's conclusion, and we'll rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call.
Okay. Shauna?
Here.
Meg?
Here.
Ryan's not here yet. Aaron?
Here.
I'm here. And don't know about Pedro yet.
All right, so with 4 members present, we have a quorum. We're hoping 2 more come. So we'll see how that goes. Would anyone like to move anything from consent to new business? No?
Oops, there he is.
All right, we're now up to 5. Okay, so we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Ryan and Mr. Carey in a second?
Second.
And a roll call.
Oops, hold on. Meg?
Aye.
Ryan?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Myself? And Shauna.
Aye. You and I, right?
Yep.
Motion carries 5-0. So we'll move on to board and superintendent salutes.
Yes, thank you. We have a few,
Go ahead.
you got everything?
Yeah.
Okay. A few things I want to share tonight. First of all, the Illinois Principals Association, along with the governor in 1990, determined that October would be Principal Appreciation Month, with last week being Principal Appreciation Week. So I'm going to take a moment to recognize our principals, make them stand, which I'm sure they don't want to, but I'll have them stand. I know you all know them, but just for anybody who's watching, live streaming it, they can put names with faces of their current principals or their principals to be soon as they transition to other buildings. So first of all, Mrs. Maris from Kaneland High School, if you would stand, please. And stay standing. Stay standing.
Nice try.
Mr. Faulkner is not here. He had a family situation that he needed to take care of. Mr. Countryman from Kaneland McDowell Elementary School. Mrs. Garland from John Stewart. Mrs. Martini McCoy from Kaneland Blackberry Creek. Shelley Huber from John Shields. And Dr. Rick Burchell from the Fox Valley Career Center. Stay standing. For once, stay standing if you would for a second. We get a nice publication from the Illinois Principals Association sharing a proclamation. So rather than read all of it to you, I just highlighted some of the key terms and roles, adjectives, and responsibilities that our principals undergo on a regular basis. So I just want to share a few of those key terms with you before I let them sit down. One of them, they play an integral role in the education and daily growth of our children. They promote our children. They promote the importance of education for our children. They build key relationships with parents, students, and teachers. They expect their students to excel, build a foundation, and a successful future for all students. They support and educate all of our students. They persevere and they're passionate for students. They encourage and support and recognize our students. And it doesn't say this, but by many times that's by noon on a Monday. They do all of those things. So on behalf of our board, thank you much for all of your work. Thank you for your leadership in your buildings. And again, another round of applause for our principals. It's especially fun to recognize them tonight because, as you know, as part of the school improvement plan, they each will come up and share a little bit about the plan, and also a few of them are going to be recognized in a few minutes for some other work that is going on and has been going on in our district. So with that, we do have a few student recognitions before we recognize some of our building leaders. So Mrs. Maris is first. Mrs. Maris, if you'd share recognition of some of our students. So thank you.
We have 4 students from Kaneland School District, and I say school district because this is an accomplishment for the entire time that they have been at Kaneland. From the National Merit Scholarship Program, 4 students have received the letter of commendation, and 2 of them are with us this evening. So if you 2 would like to come on up with me, that would be awesome.
And parents, please feel free to come up and bear some. Take a picture if you want to. You have permission to do that.
Gage and Cassidy, if you guys want to come on up while I'm reading this, and then I'm going to... So we have a certificate for each of them, and on the back of it, the National Merit Scholarship Corporation shares the following letter. Dear commended student, this letter of commendation signifies your designation as a commended student in the National Merit Scholarship Program. Your high selection index scores places you among the top 50,000 of over 1.5 million students who entered the 2020 National Merit Program by using the 2018 preliminary SAT National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. All of us associated with the program join officials of your high school in congratulating you for your excellent performance on the PSAT. You are among about 34,000 commended students nationwide who have shown exceptional academic promise. Only the 16,000 highest scoring program participants who qualify as semifinalists will continue in the competition for merit scholarship awards. However, your performance on the qualifying test was outstanding, and recognition as a commended student is a credit to you, your parents, and your high school. The degree of success you achieve in the future will depend upon you, your use of abilities, and your perseverance towards the goals you set for yourself. But we offer you our best wishes with the hope that being named a commended student in the National Merit Program will broaden your horizons and encourage you to develop your potential to the fullest. Thank you for representing Kaneland so exceptionally well. We're proud of you. This is Gage Bergman and Cassidy Motika. And Daniel DeBoer and Ben Managus were the other 2 that we will share these certificates with later. So thank you.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Next, we have Mr. Raleigh. He's going to recognize some of our middle school students, and then at our next board meeting, we do have 1 elementary student who falls in the same category, and we didn't get to that student or family in time, so we'll invite that student next week, who's kind of a precursor to what you're about to hear from Mr. Raleigh.
Perfect. And these are the precursors to potentially national merit scholars. These were some students that are being recognized for either fully or partially getting a perfect score on the Illinois Assessment of Readiness. This past school year was the first year that you may have heard that test. It was previously PARC, which has previously been ISAT and a host of other names. So this is the IAR test. We would like to recognize Paige Whiteside. She scored a perfect score on the English Language Arts section of the Illinois Assessment of Readiness. Is Paige here? Delilah Goldman, she scored a perfect score in the English Language Arts section as well. Jack Gasindi scored a perfect score in the math section last year, and Shahzad Bajwala has scored a perfect score in both the ELA and math. So the 4 of them did a fantastic job, and we are happy to salute them and honor them for their hard work.
Before we move on to the next one, which there's a couple that are staff, it's really neat because at our last meeting, if you saw it or were here, we acknowledged our art students, or a number of our artists and art students. So it's neat to see the number of our students that excel in art education, and the arts. Then tonight, an academic focus for a number and even a couple administrators that are academically accomplishing some wonderful things. And then in December, if you recall, we'll have all of our athletes and activities students that will come from middle school and high school. So the salutes are by far, I love all of the board meeting, of course, but the salutes are a wonderful chance to recognize our students. And so with that, Dr. Fuchs has a couple staff members that she is going to recognize.
Thank you. If the board will recall, at the last meeting, I described to the board all of the things that we're doing with regard to Alice, which is our safety philosophy and trying to keep all of our students safe. We've developed a task force, and we've assigned all task force members videos in which to prepare so that parents can watch the videos at their convenience rather than coming out one night a year to hear from all of the administrators. We had the first 2 videos created, and I was very pleased with them. Hopefully the board had an opportunity to take a look at them over the weekend from the Friday update. The links are in there. But if we could have Chris Weiss come up, and congratulations to Chris. Congratulations. Thank you. Chris developed the first video, and it was the basics of Alice. What is Alice? And all of the different components to Alice. What does A stand for? What does L? And how that looks. So again, Chris, thank you on behalf of all of our Kaneland parents who will watch that video for probably a few years to come. So thank you. And then I had a partner of elementary principals. So Jake Countryman, please come up, and Courtney Ward, both new in their position this year. And so Jake and Courtney did a video for elementary parents showing those parents what a barricade would look like in the classroom. And so that way they would be able to help prepare their young students for the drills that we have to do that are required by law. Additionally, the video that they did is also a part of the Canvas course, where they created a course for teachers to learn more about Alice. So I have certificates for both of you. They did an awesome job, and thank you very much. Congratulations. Thank you.
Next, in a second, Mr. Raleigh, Director of Ed Services, and Dr. Mum will both come up. And as we focused a little bit on students and their continuing education, you probably have seen and heard in the PD updates over the last couple of years the amount of time and effort and energy our administration and staff spend with the Learning Forward Conference and the Learning Forward Academy. So a couple years ago, we took the next step, and we had a team sign up for the Learning Forward Academy, and then a subsequent team is going to follow. So Dr. Mum and Mr. Raleigh will tell you a little bit more about that, and we also have certificates for our adult learners in the crowd.
So like Dr. Layden said, we've been going to the Learning Forward Conference in December for about 9 years. And a couple of years ago, 3 huge trailblazers in our administrative team said, I think there's more we can do here with the Learning Forward, and they explored the academy. I don't think the 3 ladies knew exactly what we were getting into. They knew the expectations and that it would be a full research project, starting with the problem of practice, collecting data, doing actions, analyzing, and then reflecting. Over the course of about 2 years, they have probably pulled some hair out. They have celebrated with the amount of tools and resources they've brought back. They've cheered on as we have implemented things that they have shared with us. And then at times they have gotten even more frustrated at other things that we can continue to do. And so through their problem of practice, they really have developed for us a vision of K-12 consistency when it comes to rolling out initiatives, and how we have checks and balances in place to make sure that we can always be accountable to each other, not just ourselves, not just our school, and not just our grade span, but truly an early childhood through 12th grade organization. And so the first 3 trailblazers that jumped on right away and truly have laid the foundation for our next group to go are Shelley Huber from John Shields, Jill Maris from Kaneland High School, and Martini McCoy from Blackberry Creek. And the 3 of them were very excited to take a team to the Learning Forward Conference in St. Louis in December, a little bit of a larger team because it's local and we can drive, and we get to see these 3 ladies finally graduate from their hard work. So thank you very much.
following in their footsteps are going to be 4 more of our administrators. In getting to see the 3 of them of what they've done in the past year's academy and some of the work that is being built and the momentum that's going to be used moving forward for these 4 has been really exciting. Learning Forward's an international conference. There's probably tens of thousands of people there. And Kaneland has a voice working with those administrators, coaches, teachers across the world. And some really neat things are happening, and we have a really good plan moving forward with some of the cool work that the 3 ladies have done before. It was neat to see how that evolved over time, of having the kind of a big picture problem of practice to whittling that down to something that we can really focus on and focus a lot of our professional development around. So I know the 4 people I'm about to mention are going to follow proudly in their footsteps. So after these 3 graduate, we have 4 more that are coming in as freshmen, I guess you would call them, freshmen, sophomore on a 2-year basis. We have Laura Garland from John Stewart. Kristen Faber from Kaneland High School. Carrie Oslager from Kaneland High School. And Jake Countryman from McDowell. So they are already hard at work. They are talking about homework and reading and papers and their teachers and everything. So it'll be fun to see where we're at in a couple years after all their hard work. So super proud of them.
Again, congratulations to all of you. Thank you for coming out. I know administrators, there's going to be the school improvement plan presentation shortly. Those of you that are just guests, you're welcome to stay, but this would be your time to go if you do want to go as we transition to the rest of the agenda. But again, you can
Front row.
right in the front seat. Always available seats there. Thank you and congratulations again. That was all we had for salutes, but we can let them transition.
All right, now we will move to public comment. Are there any public comments? All right, seeing none, we'll move to the consent agenda. The consent agenda contains the following action items: the approval of accounts payable and payroll October 2019, approval of minutes of the October 16th, 2019 regular meeting, approval of resignations and employment of staff, approval of change order, as well as the following informational items: student suspension data report, first quarter professional development update, Freedom of Information Act request report. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? In a second? And a roll call.
Mr. Carey. Mr. Lauer. Aye. Mrs. Pavlik. Aye. Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
And Mrs. Junk.
Motion carries 6-0. I think we're at 6-0.
Yep.
And we'll move to new business, presentation of school improvement plan.
Yep, we'll transition right back to Dr. Mumm and Mr. Raleigh, and they will kick that off again this year. And if you recall, over the last couple years, we've invited all of our principals, and it's transitioned a little bit over the years from individual buildings. They're still doing a lot, and they have a lot of target areas that they know that they need to work on, and they are working on. But if you recall, we transitioned to all-in district-wide goals, so you'll hear a little bit more about that. But that is something that we've done as part of our strategic plan and has worked well for our district. And you'll also see too is if we go to a lot of conferences, whether it's Learning Forward or other ones, a lot of them will be directly related to all of the initiatives that we have and as we work towards these goals. So, Dr. Mumm.
Thank you. As Dr. Layden kind of laid out, it is definitely an early childhood through 12th grade process. It is something that spans the whole year. I know we only come at this point in time for initial approval and then the update at the end of the year to know exactly where we've been. But it is something that we focus on all summer long in the preparation of it. Spring, we review the data. And then at this point in time, we're really checking our progress, doing professional development, working with students, having student intervention in different areas to make sure that we are always focused on the 2 goals that we have. A couple of just structural things for the presentation. I'm going to give you the overview and lead you up to the data, and then Patrick is going to look at the specific pre-data that was collected and how that compared to the data that we collected last February for a couple of goals that are very similar. And then we'll transition on into having all the principals. It'll be a little bit of a shifting, so we apologize for shifting, but we wanted to make sure everyone had a piece of the presentation. The principals will talk about our specific action plans, our next steps, and then any specific action plans above and beyond these two goals that are happening within their buildings or grade spans, and then we can open it up for questions. Of course, if you have questions at any time, just raise, holler, whatever, have us stop, because sometimes it might be easier to answer the question right on the slide than wait till the end, but we will open at the end with some questions for any one of the administrators. So like I said, the process is really a year-long, never-ending cycle. It feels like we're celebrating in the same breath that we're projecting to the next year. And so last May, we took our school improvement data that we collected in February and instantly started looking at it with staff and stakeholder groups to say, what did we miss? How did we need to shift? What other things does this tell us about our progress within the two goals of proficiency-based progress and the learner profile? From that, we identified in our process, which is very similar to the one that you saw last year, but one key difference is we wanted some midpoint check-ins. Last year, if you remember, we had our pre-data collected, and then we waited till February for our post-data, which links up with the principal evaluation cycle and staff evaluation cycle. Based on a reflection from the data last year in our process, we really knew that we needed a progress check around November, December. And so although we're doing comprehensive data collections in September, in February to follow that evaluation cycle, this year we're also going to be doing 25% mid-year check-ins so that we can kind of assess what progress have we made in a couple months, and with the remaining couple months in the cycle, what do we have left? Last year, we ended with our data collection in February, and we knew we wanted to go all the way to the end of the year. Again, you have to end in February to follow the evaluation cycles for administrators and teachers, but it didn't tell our whole story, and we felt that that data point was missing. And so we're going to also have data checks when we come to May to be able to see the full scope of a school year and the progress on the data. A couple of connections. Dr. Layden had mentioned a couple of them already. It links to the strategic plan, which I know we are concluding, and hopefully the future strategic plan will have some connections to it as well. Really looking at how we personalize our learning for students. How do we move it and shift it from differentiation to truly student-driven, personalized learning experiences? Through the honeycomb, which is hopefully some words that you've heard us talk about over the past couple of years of personalized learning, you have three core cells. The learner profile, where we want all students to know about themselves, how they need a learning environment and advocate, as well as teachers knowing about all of their students. That's one of our focus areas. The second core cell of the honeycomb is proficiency-based progress. Once you know about your learning styles and once your teachers know about your learning styles, how can you show us that you have gotten proficiency in a certain standard? And once you do that, what's your next step? Do you need to wait for the group of students to come and everyone move at once? Or truly in proficiency, once you have shown proficiency, what is your next customized path or next plan for learning? Our third cell is customized paths, which is not a goal at this time because we need to make sure we have alignment within learner profile and understanding proficiency expectations before you really develop those customized paths. So that will be coming hopefully in the future once these two goals are accomplished. So the first goal is the learner profile goal. It's a goal that's going on almost its third year with some tweaks along the way. It is an early childhood through 12th grade, and it is a goal that staff can opt into in this year. The second goal is our all-in goal. The learner profile is really having students self-assess and write a reflection. In the past, we would go out and interview students for this, but what we found through reflecting on the last 2 years, students tell us in written work much more about what they know about themselves than when an adult comes and asks them questions that they may not know that adult, and we're asking them to think about themselves. And so it was one opportunity that we wanted to collect written work from students and be able to assess what they know about their learning styles and how they use that to draft and guide their learning. You can see the rubric back there, some examples. If we took a student's written work on the learner profile, and some of the examples I'm going to give you were actual ones we collected, and they just listed fun things that they like I like mice, I like frogs. That was a 0. They had no idea exactly about the learner aspect of the profile, but they may have known something about themselves, but that missed the mark and that would have been a 0. If the student was able to say, I know the learner profile asked me about a tradition my family does, but maybe it didn't say the tradition, or it didn't go on to say how that tradition could impact their learning, or something that they wanted to share, that would be a level 1. A level 2 is that they knew something about themselves and it had to directly link to an action within the classroom. And so in other words, they may say, I'd like to read in a very high-lit area, but when I'm doing critical problem solving, I would like to dim the lights. That tells us that they know about themselves and they know something in their learning style, but maybe they haven't shared that with anyone or advocated with a teacher to change their environment during those times. Our ideal goal is that students will know about themselves, they'll reflect, and then they'll go and approach either self-advocate, peer to, or student to teacher advocate, or peer to peer. So an example of a level 3 that we read was, I know that in mathematics, I need a sounding board in order to problem solve and think through the strategies of what computational strategy I want to use. So I go to my friends and ask, can we work on certain problems together prior to me doing independent work? That is an absolute level 3. They've identified something about themselves, and they're finding a way to advocate to meet their needs. The learner profile data you can see from last year. This is a February to February goal. Although we collect pre-data in September, we want to make sure that we're comparing the exact data point from February to February. And so last February, we wanted to make sure that we were higher than 56% where we ended. And so we've set our 4 levels based on trying to get to that 65% by this February. The ultimate goal when you look at the research in personalized learning is over the course of that 3 to 5 year goal of implementation, you want to map out progress to the point where you get to 85%. When you're at 85% in your 4th or 5th year, then you know you're ready to take on that next core cell. And so our goal is that we're in the process of growing our knowledge of our students and advocating for themselves up to that point where we're ready to shift into customized path work. Yeah.
Why 85 and not 100?
It's a great question. The research will tell you in personalized learning that you're always going to have legacy learners. There's always going to be a percent, and it's sometimes between 15 and 20% of your students that just need direct instruction, and they don't need to know how to reflect and advocate because they work best in a traditional direct instruction classroom. And so that's why the research out of the Institute for Personalized Learning shoots for that amount, to know when you're ready to go. It doesn't necessarily say leave students behind, it just says when you're ready to add the next piece. Okay. We asked that question right away when we were actually looking at the research, because I thought if we're not all ready, and they said you'll never be all ready because some students very much don't know why they need it, they just need to be directly instructed. Great question. The one thing we recognized through reflection of the learner profile as well is that we needed to do a bit more with staff knowledge and application. We've made the learner profile when it first came out a tool that students could use to reflect and that they could share with their staff. In doing that in our first year, 2 years ago, it almost became an optional piece for our staff, and we want to make sure our staff understand the profile, have filled it out themselves, and even advocate for themselves in their professional development experiences with it. So not only is it a school improvement goal focused on student application, but we also made it an administrative organizational goal in our administrator evaluations to make sure that the staff understanding and application also increased as self-reported on a survey from September to February during that time.
Sarah?
Yeah.
Before we move on, I see data collection next. On the levels that you mentioned earlier, the 0, 1, 2, 3, and such, how do you strategize to have a child bring out that example that you...
To advocate?
I mean, you talk about, it may be the levels, because I know when you get to the teenage years, as you have teenagers, it's hard to pull that information out of them. So can you give me an example of how you strategize?
For sure, yeah. It really goes almost down to modeling different ways for them as educators within the classroom so that they know that that risk to advocate is acceptable. And so one of the professional development experiences that we're doing with staff in the next coming months is modeling how do you advocate and how do you respond when a student might be advocating, but they're a little nervous to do it. And so we're going to practice crucial conversations. We're going to think about the classroom setting and think about, from an educator's perspective, what's allowable on that advocacy continuum, and then have the staff members share that with students within a lesson. Because right now, I think in talking with a lot of students and even reading their written learner profile, they may know what they want, but they don't know how to ask for it. And so we need to model some question stems or advocacy stems for them. Or I know how to ask for it, but I know I'm going to be turned down because that's a perception they have of traditional learning. And so we need to make sure that they know we're an open environment where bring that suggestion. And if it's not something within a reasonable manner, we can problem solve together, and we need to model that for our students.
So how do you find the time when you have 24 of these differences in front of you? And have the time to be able to break it down?
Yep. I think there's a lot of modeling whole class, what that could look like, what you could say in advocacy, and then thinking about the different structures we could do it. Some students will do it through email to their teachers, and so it's not an in-class time. And some will do it during their study hall, but be talking about, let's say, geometry. So then what structures do we have in place for the study hall teacher to get that information back to the geometry teacher, the core teacher that needs to know that information? Some of them will and are setting up individual conference days within their content. So I may be teaching small group, whole group for 4 days, but my 5th day is going to be a signed up conferencing time. And that conferencing time is the ideal structure for those conversations to have, because I can listen and watch your body language and think, oh, he's about to advocate for something, and really push to kind of get those questions out there. If I am observing you one-on-one, it is much harder when I'm trying to look at the whole class at once. So we need to look at our instructional strategies to be able to do that.
And what percentages do you see the grouping of children? There may be like 20% of them are at that level usually. Do you see that where you don't have to spend so much time?
Right. It's a great question. I know last February we ended within students that could identify what they needed and then advocating, which was level 2 and 3. We ended right around 57% of our students. And so we know some of that percent is going to remain the same for this fall, which you'll see the full data in a minute. But we know some have probably, it didn't work for me and I've regressed a little, or I'm there, but I don't know how to quite advocate in all my classes. And so we're trying to move that 57% up to the closer to 65, and then the next goal would be 75, and the final goal would be 85.
Awesome, nice setup for the day.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And then you can see on this, just for the organizational goal, this would be applying to administrative evaluations only of what percent we want to see the staff knowledge and application really increase from from September to February. So you can see our 4 evaluative levels based on that. Patrick is going to go ahead and share the pre-data that we got. And again, the learner profile is an interesting one because we're comparing February to February, but we definitely want to take our temperature of where are we coming into the school year to see where we need to be in February.
Thank you.
This, this slide has been updated. When we did our data collection, the window we gave to the data collectors went through last Friday. So when the board packet was prepared, this pie chart was not part of that because we wanted to allow for that final scoring to come through. So this is where we sit right now with our pre-data for the learner profile. So if you can't see those tiny little numbers, I do apologize, but we're at about 49% right now at that 2 or 3 level. So as Sarah had mentioned, last February we ended at about 56 or 57. We did take a little bit of a dip there, and it's new teachers to the district, new instructional settings, kind of to piggyback off what Sarah was saying, a lot of the work that we've done with teachers has really been looking at those instructional practices where, as you know, you mentioned those teenagers and it's harder to pull some of that information. We're working with the adults to create the environment in a class to be able to do that. And it's different than me standing and addressing my 30 students for 50 minutes. It's empowering them, and we're doing some professional development with how to empower peer-to-peer feedback, and it's really neat to see that shift, but it is a work in progress. It is a shift that's happening, and as we go through, some of those things are happening more organically of, well, I see the value in knowing my students. I see the value in assessing them on proficiency scales. In order to do that, I'm going to have to change some of my practices. So that light bulb is coming on naturally for some, and sometimes we do have some very targeted PD that we structure, but as we start that, and we're balancing between the learner profile and proficiency-based progress, to start the year, we're right at about 49% there with our learner profile. This goal is similar to what we've done in the past. Some revisions this year and things, these are based off of feedback that we received from staff. So number one, the data we're collecting is based off of a written prompt. So for our primary students, our K through 3 students, that is a handwritten prompt. So teachers collect that and share that with our office. For our 4th through 12th grade students, that was pushed out through Canvas. We do have the luxury of having Chromebooks for our 4th through 12th graders. So there was a Canvas course that was created through that. So they actually typed in the prompts, directions, video, so they could go back and replay that video to make sure they're able to do exactly what we're asking them to do. And the other thing we did with that is we targeted who the data collectors were going to be. So to give an example of that, last year we would have some people go in and working with, we might have middle school, high school, cabinet level members that come into a kindergarten classroom and seeing this person for the first time, asking questions, and naturally those students might be a little bit more shy and they're not truly sharing what their understanding of this was. So based on, we would get some of this data back. I'm like, oh man, I know my kids know this, but sometimes it is the environment in which they're asked. So we wanted to provide a comfortable environment to truly gauge what their understandings were. So we changed up how we collected that data a little bit, or who was doing that data collection. We have a sample size of about 1,200 students. We had probably close to 2,000 that completed those, and we randomly selected 1,200. And then we are going to go through another thing we heard back in response to some of the feedback that we heard from staff, were that we wanted that mid-year check-in. So come November, which is already here at the end of this week, we're going to go through and we're going to do some smaller sample sizes to get a check-in to see how we're progressing through with this data. And then again, the numbers we have for the goal, like Sarah had mentioned, we need to have those just for evaluation timeline by February. But there's a ton of work that's going to happen from February to May, so we want to get a true picture. So we will do some of that smaller sampling towards the end of the year in May as well. Again, so shifting away from the learner profile. So we want to really know who our kids are. We want to make sure that they're advocating for their learning needs, and then we want to make sure that we're changing the learning environment for them. The proficiency-based progress goal comes out of teacher clarity, of making sure that our students know explicitly what they are learning on a given day, that the teachers are giving them feedback specific to what that learning target is. You will hear the words I can statement or we can statement. That is, if you're more familiar with a learning objective, an I can statement is what that target, the focused target is for a class. So it might be I can add, subtract, multiply, and divide fractions, or I can add or subtract 3-digit numbers. So a teacher is going to tell their students when they come in the class, here is what we're going to do for the day. Should be posted. Hopefully the kids know that this is the purpose of this goal, is to measure that. As the lessons happen, we want to make sure that teachers are giving targeted feedback to that specific I can statement. And then we want to make sure when you get to this, the level 3 here, is our kids know what they're learning, they're getting feedback on that, and then they are able to change their learning up based off of the feedback that they've received from the teacher. So it's no longer I'm coming to sit in a lesson, teacher's going to talk at me for a while, and then I'm going to go on. If I'm not ready, I still have to move on. It's really gauging where the kids are at and helping them develop a plan moving forward once they get that specific feedback. You can see, again, this is for the evaluation goal for that proficiency-based piece. The last slide had it, we're right at about 29% when we checked in at the start in September. Our goal is to get that level that are at that 2 and 3. So those that have identified what their I can statement is and are receiving feedback is the level 2, and then taking that feedback and changing their learning, changing their approach, moving forward. So we're right at about 29%. As this data was collected, we saw a lot of the data collectors that were mentioning, I see the I can statement posted, the teacher has referenced them, but the students weren't able to identify them. So a lot of what we're doing administratively is making sure we're finding natural ways to call attention to what those targeted areas are. And teachers have the autonomy to do that in a variety of different ways, but we want to make sure that students are very clear on what the expectations are and what those lessons are. This is again, just a sample of a pie chart of the pre-observation or the pre-data collection. Again, our target was a sample size of about 1,200. And like I said, we're right at about that 27-28% that are recognizing what they are, and they're getting targeted feedback to that I can statement. Yep, and I am going to pass it off to Shelley. Are there any questions about any of that?
That proficiency level that went from 58 to 28, is that because of the difference in who the students were, or?
Probably a variety of different pieces. It's different students that were randomly selected. It is, as we go through new curricular maps, as we go through more professional development, it's finding a way to make sure that we're giving that targeted area, that learning target. So it's a variety of different reasons. This was collected right at the beginning of September, so right as kids were coming into that heavy academic period, coming out of August, but typical dip there.
Okay, so I'm assuming then come February of 2020, you expect that number to be up again?
Yes, that's our intent, and that's
He
part
said
of
yes, not-
part of that organizational goal is building those structures. Like I said, some of the data collectors were mentioning, it's there. The teachers are doing. They're presenting that, it's posted. Now we need to figure out, okay, in a given lesson, how do we naturally call attention to what those target areas are, those I can statements are. So it is working with the teachers to reframe their approach to teaching.
Is there any other way that you've looked at that data to see, do you look at it that way, like high school stayed on target both times, but this group took a dip, or is there any other way, because it is such a significant change, that you can look at the data, or does it come, a unit's a unit, you can't differentiate by the grade they're in, or I don't know what else you might want to look at.
We can break it out by grade span, so we can look at it EC 5, 6, 8, and then 9 through 12. This we did not, though, because it was a district-wide focus, and those the random samples are from EC 12, so we looked at it as that whole district picture.
I think that's one of the reasons why we often write the goals February to February, because we know when you have a new instructor or you're in a new classroom, the dip will naturally occur because it's setting up routines in September. Yeah. So that's why it's so important to look at that February to February, because otherwise you're just kind of redoing the summer dip here.
Okay.
Is there any issue with the data collection change, right? So you're using a different methodology now, so could that create a different variable?
This one didn't. This one is still personal interviews.
Oh, it's still personal interviews. Yep. Okay, you haven't altered that yet.
Learner profile, possibly.
Okay.
What percentage of the time, whether it be a day or as far as the week goes or a day, is broken down to focus on the profile or what have you, or the learning habits or what have you?
That's a great question. For proficiency-based progress, I would say, hopefully, that to start every lesson, again, we don't want anything to be a surprise for students coming through our door. So, and that's some of the work that we're doing, is that it's really easy to call attention to what my learning target is, what my I can statement is for the day. Sometimes those are written as, it might be a 2 or 3 day lesson. It might be that I can might be broken down more into the minutia of what's happening that specific day. But for a teacher, we want this to become common practice where I'm starting the best ones I've seen, even in a very intensive 30-minute period, we started with what the ICANNs were. Students, they did the lesson, and then there was a few minutes right at the end to pull those back out and say, okay, our ICANN statements were X, Y, and Z. How did we go about doing that today? Let's assess ourselves. Let's reflect. Were we able to meet those? Which ones do I need to work on moving forward? In a 30-minute lesson, that took maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Establish routines. This was, I'm thinking of a time specifically last year where those routines were set and established, and that's the goal that we're looking to. This should not, all right, I'm going to stop my instruction for 10 or 15 minutes and go. We want this to become just natural for when kids come through. Okay, today's lesson is posted. Here's what we're doing. Here's our target area. Let's get going with it. And then what we had talked about before with changing up some of those structures, that piece, that reflection piece is key. And it's a change in practice for some where we think, I can't give up my instructional time in order to reflect. I think what we're starting to see is that reflection is a huge part of instruction. It's a huge part of learning. So that we will continue to push. We want that to be a huge focus in all of our classes.
Back on what Patrick was saying, I think one of the changes are the language that was being used. Like we were saying, we were being very explicit, and you're saying, I'm giving you feedback, where before teachers would be like, well, we're conferencing. Kids don't necessarily, especially at the elementary level, know that when my teacher conferences with me and tells me this is what I need to do better, that equals feedback. So I think the language that we're being very explicit in they're using, so when you say to a student, did you get any feedback? They're like, no. Now it's very, yes, this is feedback for you. So I think those things will improve as well, just the language that we're using. So Patrick's kind of gone over what the data collection and monitoring plan was. We're all using a common tool. Everybody's been trained together. One change that I think is a addition to what we were doing is our instructional coaches are also doing the data collection. So some of the people that are talking to the students and interviewing them, so to speak, they know who those people are. Like I did it in my building, and the instructional coaches have been trained, and the students see those in all 4 buildings. The people interviewing are people that the students know. I do know that some teachers are like, well, this guy came in and he's wearing a suit, and the student only sees him 3 times. It's hard to open up and answer a question when you're a 2nd grader and you don't even know who this person is. As nice looking as they are. Not necessarily Todd, I'm just saying, a suit. And the fact that we have 1,200 data points, all of them were collected through student interviews. I know as an interviewer, I got better this 2nd year than when last time I was a little bit too stilted. Now I try and use more language that they would understand. Like when they say, no, my teacher didn't do an ICANN. Did they give you a focus for the lesson? Well, yeah, but it's just a matter of our interviewing skills got better. And then I think the data points that Sarah and Patrick are going to be collecting of approximately 300 students will help determine, are we getting better at this, or is this something that we need to be looking at a little bit more? Any questions on our data collection?
What are the challenges you dealing with the little ones, if you will? What are the challenges you come about as far as you got the different type of learners, you got the different personalities, and how do you compensate for that?
One of the things that I've learned when you asked the question before about teenagers are little kids are pretty honest, and they will tell you. Like a freshman might be hesitant to say, this is what I need. A 6-year-old's going to say, I need this. Because elementary is basically all I've done, I think it's easier with the little kids. You give them a target and they know what it is they're supposed to be paying attention to. They don't have as much schema to distract them, so to speak. But all I know is elementary.
You still have the quiet ones.
Yeah, but then that's when you want to make sure that you have a relationship with the student that you're talking to. Like I wouldn't go into a room if no student knew who I was. Most of them, oh, you're Mrs. Huber. You know what I mean? You read in that classroom a couple times and they know who you are instead of just some stranger coming in. And they're just more honest. Good, bad, or indifferent. They don't have that, ooh, should I say that? They're just, they say it. At least that's what. Too much. Yeah, yeah. Any other questions about how we collect the data? Thanks.
Okay, so we've heard a lot about data collection, and now we're going to talk a little bit more about what our action is with that data from early childhood to 12th grade. So one thing that you'll hear and our teachers are actively working on is something called proficiency tables, and they're working on creating those now. They started on our first Institute Day. I was actually working with a group today with critical thinking teachers on writing their proficiency tables, and they'll continue doing that throughout the school year. Part of their plan of work is to create how much work they'll be able to get done in that course of the year and adjust that as they're working, which will help guide us in our action plans in the future. So those are pretty exciting. I can't see that far. Let's see. The other thing that teachers are working on is creating what a strong proficiency is. So gaining agreement, this sounds kind of simple, but gaining agreement in a grade level about what we think is a high quality piece of work is something that we've done maybe at our school, but not for everything. And so doing that across the district and having shared agreement of what that is, I think will really kind of help us have clear expectations, have a clear focus and target, and hopefully increase some student learning, which I think is a great thing, whether you're a student who prefers legacy style or a personalized learning opportunity. So that's something that comes out of that proficiency table subgroup. The other piece that students will be, or teachers will be working on is having a difference between what is a product and an outcome that you want for students to do and the process for their learning, which maybe you'd take into a consideration their learner profile as you're developing that process, or even as you're saying what kinds of products would meet those expectations for learning that you're creating. And then finally, like I just mentioned, aligning those learner profile slides with your grade level span. So there's parts of our curriculum that we've already aligned those to, but there's also other opportunities for our teachers to kind of say, this is another place that this learner profile could come alive and become a document that is used for students to really articulate how they know they're best at learning and become a tool that they use. Kind of like a portfolio is another way to kind of think about that. So a lot of that work will continue to be developing all year. Another thing that we'll be working with our staff is really honing in on their conferencing or conferring skills, so that when they're having a conference with a student, they can really hone in to helping the student learn how to advocate back for themselves, and not just the teacher kind of looking at a rubric or an assessment page and saying, yes, you're doing fine on that, yes, you're doing fine on that, yes, you're doing fine on that, you're proficient. That we'd want to hope that our students would be able to also join in that conference so that they can know what that proficiency looks like as well. And then finally, I'm sure you've heard us talk about the honeycomb. Sarah mentioned that with the 3 cells. One of the things that we talk about with teachers is building a constellation. So starting with the core honeycomb cells and then adding out to it to build a constellation for what that learning might look like. So some visible ones that you might think of are, because I know my students based on their learner profile, maybe something I know they might need is lighting or seating that allows them to learn their best, and so flexible seating might be another cell that I add into my constellation when I'm designing lessons for my students. And so that's something that we refine every year as part of our process. Are there any questions? Cool, I think Laura's next.
So going just a little bit deeper into the action plans, specifically at the early childhood through 5th grade level, one of the things that we work on, and although it's on the EC5 slide, it really is still an EC12 experience. We meet monthly as an administrative team for administrative professional development, and at those meetings, one of the things that we do is plan professional development for all of our teachers. It takes the span of 2 to 3 months to really kind of complete a planning cycle. Initially, we talk about what are the needs that we're identifying from our staff, what supports
inputs do they need? What additional information do we need to provide? What opportunities for collaboration? Patrick and Sarah do a great job of bringing some suggestions, some ideas. Everybody at each of the levels really contributes to here's what that might look like, that experience might look like for teachers at our level. We might do that as a whole faculty. We might do that at grade level team meetings, perhaps on a late start. We really kind of leave those meetings with a plan of here's how we're going to implement this professional development back at the building. The following month, then we have an opportunity to debrief. How did that go? What was the experience for your staff? What feedback did you get? And what follow-up might need to take place to ensure that all of the staff have a consistent understanding of what the expectation is. That's probably the most valuable thing I would imagine all of us would agree on, is being able to hear how did that go in your building? What type of feedback did the teachers give you? Again, that aligns with our goal to make sure that we're providing these consistent experiences. That language piece that I've heard some of my colleagues mention is crucial to make sure that we're using the same language. We have clarity on what those goals are, regardless of the level that we happen to work at. We ultimately want the same things for our students. Another action plan is to increase the intentionality of the feedback that we're providing teachers through both formal and informal evaluation opportunities. When we go in and do the interviews, the number one question that I'm asked by teachers is, what did they say? When you ask them those questions, what did they tell you? Why did you talk to him for a long time? What was that all about? They want to know what their students are saying, and are their students able to articulate their learning to someone other than their teacher? So that teachers will often say, I know they know it, but were they able to tell you that? Were they able to advocate for themselves to you versus to me? So one of the things we've started doing on our feedback forms is even just typing out the conversation. Observer asked the student this question, this was the student's answer, and then being able to provide the teacher with some feedback of the student had a clear ability to do this, but this was where maybe they were a little bit weak. They enjoy seeing that, and it keeps the focus on the goals that we have. That mid-year data point I've heard several people mention. I think that is crucial and a big piece of feedback that we received from teachers as well as our own reflections was the importance of being able to monitor our progress along the way. We need to know that we're gradually moving towards these goals. So that was, I think, really a non-negotiable in our conversations in terms of drafting these goals for this year. And then the proficiency table work that Martini just talked about, having consistent sub-days, that is something that we've all prioritized. There's a lot of competing needs for sub-usage and different committees and things that teachers sit on, and we've really prioritized these proficiency tables as, if we're short a sub, we are not pulling back the proficiency table teachers. That work needs to happen to move us forward on these goals. And so, as you can imagine in the district, there's lots of competing interests that come up. The work of that proficiency table is so crucial to our success that has to be prioritized. So every grade level, including exploratory teams, have consistent time where they work across the 4 elementary buildings to ensure that there's a voice from each building. So it's not just Stewart getting to decide what a proficiency table for 3rd grade math looks like. It's representatives from all 4 elementary buildings so that we have that consistent agreement. The group that I happen to oversee is the 4th grade ELA team. Having just worked with them last Thursday, what I think was so beneficial about that experience is not only did they do their work on their proficiency tables, but the amount of collaboration that happened of, well, how do you support students on this objective? I have a student who's struggling here. What tool do you use for that? All of that was embedded in providing that consistent experience across the elementary levels. So those are truly just a few of the things that we have going on to ensure that the goals are progressing. Any questions about the EC5 action plan?
All right, I'm bringing up the tail end of the EC5 here, but I think a lot of what's been talked about is just the framework and the big ideas for what we're doing in the district and how we're putting all of this into place. This really gets into some of those committees that Laura was just mentioning and kind of the what. As we know in education, things are constantly changing. Sometimes it's state-driven, sometimes it's policy-driven, but a lot of it we are continually reviewing with our curriculum review cycles, and so this is kind of our other focus areas that we're getting into and kind of what cyclical is coming up for us. And so focusing on our language arts maps, and vetting various resources through some different spots around the district of
grade level teams trying different tools out in reading, and we're going to go through that process with that larger group coming together, analyzing the different tools that they've worked on and saying, okay, what is best meeting the needs of our students, what best fits our ideas as far as looking at those honeycomb models, learner profile, proficiency-based progress, and saying, what tools now fit our ideas and our philosophy as a district that's driven from our strategic plan. And if they don't, then maybe that's not for us. Might be a great tool, but it's not a Kaneland tool. And what does, and we can really support our students' needs in reading in that area. Continuing to review support from moving from what you might know as response to intervention into a multi-tiered system of support, or MTSS system, for our students. We talked a lot about how great our RTI system is at the EC5 level and in Kaneland all the way through when we talk about an EC12 plan, just continuing that RTI support structure. But we're always looking to continuously improve. And so with some changes in policy saying, okay, now we're going to go to this multi-tiered system of support, we looked at that as a great opportunity for us to say, what is really good about our system in RTI, which we know has a huge impact on students, and what could we make better, or what could we tie in to have a greater impact on student learning, whether it's a learning in an SEL situation or learning in an academic situation, and how to meld all of that together. So we're meeting with a group of about 30 staff members on a consistent basis. They then meet in subgroups, and we're working towards some common goals in MTSS, and just looking at what kind of MTSS system meets our needs and meets the needs of our students that we support. So that will be going on throughout the year, and we're in kind of the middle stages of that for this year, and we'll look to roll out some things with MTSS as we continue into next year and late this year to get everything shored up. We're continuing to line interventions in school-wide systems within SEL supports as we've seen more and more need in this area of social and emotional learning. We just continually monitor that and say, okay, what fits our strategic plan, and looking at our core values as a Kaneland community and for our Kaneland staff and students, and how do we meet the needs of those students. And we really, at the EC5 level, put a focus to begin this year of creating those classroom communities and making sure that everyone's feeling welcome, and we really focused on that to start the year, and including that with the ALICE stuff of making sure that our students feel safe and our staff feels safe. They're able to open up and really express themselves in a way that ties into their learner profile, and being okay with who they are, sharing those family traditions. So we're continuing to align interventions there and look at that tying to our MTSS structures as well. Then we have, yeah.
I'm not remembering, or maybe I didn't hear, but I don't remember you talking about changing from RTI to MTSS.
Yep, and that's a policy-driven focus that really came from some implementation gaps that were being seen statewide in RTI and nationally. And so there's been a push to move to this multi-tiered system of support.
You're talking about different staffing plans and different...
All that stuff has not been fully looked at quite yet. So that would be, some of our RTI structures are in place now. So we have interventionists that support reading, we have interventionists that support math, and so those areas will still be supported. And what that MTSS structure looks like is what we're going through now. So that's the process that we're in currently. We don't have a staffing pattern that's specific to MTSS to bring to you today. That we are looking at all kinds of structures and exploring all kinds of options. Dr. Mum and I did a bunch of research and looked at a bunch of MTSS handbooks from all over the place in different states, and so we were able to kind of pull all that together and share with a larger group, and then we always want our staff input. So we brought those folks in and kind of said, all right, what does this look like for us? What do we have that some of these handbooks that are out there, we in a lot of cases had more support through our RTI system that was already in place than people out there were putting into their MTSS system. So we were looking at that as, oh, this is a great thing for us. We already have some staff in those positions that people are just now adding, and that's really what the change from RTI to MTSS was, is pushing people to gain more support in some of the areas that we already had it. So we'll look at that as we continue with our subgroup and our group
So that'll come back
as well.
at some point like you do with other course changes or curriculum changes?
Yes.
Or part of staffing.
If there's staffing pattern changes to that, yeah, we would come back with those sorts of things.
So MTSS is multi-tier
System of
student
support.
systems?
Yep.
Or structure?
System of support.
So then we would, there's some of the other things that we're working on. We have a committee that's reviewing some of the cursive instruction that's taking place, SEL, grammar, our word study through ELA, and looking at different structures and tools in those cases. Our continuing monitoring of the co-teaching pilots that are going on. We have teachers from across the district at the EC5 level visiting some of those classrooms that are already using co-teaching, looking at how can we fit those needs in different buildings for some of the buildings that are already doing it, what's going really well, what's maybe something we need to work to improve upon. So that's consistently happening. There's been a couple of visits already, and they work with teachers, both special education teachers and general education teachers, to kind of compare notes and see what's worked well, see what we can improve on as we move forward with that. Exploring the use of Canvas, we've talked about that several times already tonight through the one-to-one that's happened with our students at the elementary level. We have devices in almost all of our hands at the elementary level, and continuing to use those and how teachers can use Canvas, and teachers have really jumped on board and done a lot of things, and we've used it a lot for staff development as well. So just kind of exploring that tool as we continue to learn it. And then creating structures for building collective efficacy, and something that we've looked at over the past few years with staff, of really making sure that all of the students are all of our students, and we believe that if I send a student next door that they're getting just as good of education. I'm looking at the strengths of my teaching partners, and maybe they can do something a little bit better than I can, so I'm happy to learn from them, and then send a student over there and make sure that they're getting just as good of education and belief in ourselves and one another as a staff. So that's where we're really looking into and pushing more and more with our staff and our administrative team as well. Questions for me?
Mr. Countryman.
Yes, sir.
Gentleman with fresh eyes, right? Just came in, if you will. What of the challenges, and you went through the whole gamut there.
Yep.
Of the things that we are doing and challenging ourselves with, what is the area would you say that's been more challenging for you?
I think as we continue to look at SEL needs, just the social emotional learning of our students, I think that's an area that we see internationally as a major place where we can continue to grow. And what does that look like for Kaneland, and what does that look like as our kids enter the world, seeing beyond the doors of Kaneland High School, and how can we support that at the youngest levels? So I think that's an area that everyone, society is trying to wrap their head around. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge at this point.
Okay. And just want to give you kudos for your little tweets that you have with the children.
Thank you.
It's an awesome thing.
Thank you. All right, I get to hand it over to Jill and move on.
So I'm speaking now for 6 through 12, and along with EC5, we are continuing also to support our staff with the parts of learning about learner profile and the proficiency-based progress, doing the similar kinds of monthly activities that were described for you earlier. As our staff is working really hard to identify those ICANNs, the standards, and the assessments to go along with that, we're trying also to pull out the learner behaviors that are also happening, so that when we're giving a grade and we're giving feedback, that it truly is the academic side of it. It's not about whether or not you turned in your homework. And so what we're also working on, our school improvement team, is looking at the 3 core values that we have identified: respect, rapport, and commitment to excellence. And they're also developing proficiency tables for those. Knowing that our staff is spending a heck of a lot of time trying to get this other work done, the school improvement team is trying to pilot some of these things on their own, work out some of the tweaks before we actually take it back to the staff to look at what would this look like when we were actually giving students feedback on these core values, and how often would we do that, and how would we be reporting it, and things like that. So the school improvement team is working at this point on that part, looking to see how can we roll that out with the rest of the staff towards the end of this school year. We will also be doing the mid-year data checkpoints like the rest of the group too. And then not only are we providing that time for the staff on our monthly faculty meetings They've got their time during their KLCs, and then administratively, we meet with the department chairs and building leadership team to get a sense of what else is needed. Are there resources? Are there times? The elementary was talking about subs. We try and do some of that as well. How can we help facilitate their needs in order to get all of this rolled out? So that's what's happening 6 through 12. I'll pass it off to Chris.
I'll do my best to, well, not impersonate Brian, but at any rate. So we've got, a lot of our areas of focus for Harder have been common for the last several years. So this year we've got implementation of the ELA curriculum that we went through that process last year. This year we're starting our math curriculum review. So we're working on what kinds of resources we're going to use for that, getting all of that aligned. Continuing to work on our learner profile, as everyone else has in classes. We're going to be doing some further development of Canvas and Tyler in that reporting of non-academic behaviors like Jill was talking about, that getting those I didn't do my homework separated from what I actually know, because we all know kids who understand exactly what they need to do and they didn't need the homework to do it. They didn't need the homework to figure it out. So trying to get those things separated so we really know the difference between what they understand and what they just aren't doing. Obviously with the, or shouldn't say obviously, but with this year, with the passing of the recent KEA contract, we'll be able to start planning and doing some of the work to get a homeroom instituted into the day in the next few years. So we're starting that team this year and beginning that work. That's a very extensive work, not only figuring out how that will work within the schedule, but then developing the, well, I'll just call it, for lack of a better term, a curriculum and what we're going to do during that time. We have the development and implementation of self-awareness activities for students and staff this year in response to exactly what Jake was talking about earlier with a lot of SEL needs with kids. We're trying to do very simple, small things that will help them become more self-aware in when they're stressed, things that they can do to de-stress and just kind of deal a little better with what we consider the things that just, they happen in life. The unfortunate thing is at their age, they don't have the skills that we do. So we try to get them those skills, earlier. And then finally, we are up for Schools to Watch redesignation again this year. If we get redesignated, which we're all, I think it's safe to say that what we do here at Harder is significant when you compare it to a lot of other 6-8 grade level span schools, and the positives that we continue to do. I don't see that redesignation being an issue. However, probably shouldn't count my chickens before we hatch. But assuming that happens, that will be our second redesignation. So we're looking forward to seeing that come to fruition, as that work has been ongoing since July. So, questions?
What is the key thing that we try to show, if you will, for the School to Watch?
The key thing is that we're responsive to student needs. That really is the biggest, that's the huge thing with middle school, is just that you try to be responsive to their learning needs, their emotional needs, their social needs, because unfortunately, as anybody that's had a 11 through 14-year-old knows, this is the beginning of the craziness. And even though there's still some craziness at the high school level, they've kind of figured out how to deal with the craziness, some of them by that time, but it's all about trying to figure that all out when they're here. So I think that's just that responsiveness to their needs is probably the biggest thing.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, thanks.
And then the other areas that the high school is going to be focusing on is we will also continue to work on our staff and students being able to access and use Canvas progressively. But for us, Canvas and Tyler is also going to continue to be about the actual grade. And so how do we go about reporting the academic grade as well as that behavioral feedback that we were talking about with the core values? So working with Canvas and Tyler to try and figure out and get those kinks all worked out is part of what we're working on this year. We have been piloting several classes over the last 2 years, mostly in English with the standard-based grading. We had some additional ones that were added on for this current year, and then we've got a group that'll be doing also some piloting for that following year and the progressive rollout of that standard-based grading in all of our classes eventually.
When is eventually?
Is that something, go ahead and.
We're meeting Thursday morning to finalize that timeline. We've had a discussion with me as the EC5 director present, but not any EC5 administrators, and it has an impact EC12. And so we have an initial timeline that we want to propose with some administration from elementary present. And so we can answer that probably in a better answer November 11th.
I think the other thing that you're going to find is, as they were sharing, when our staff is working on those proficiency tables, they are also filling out a timeline to let us know what would our expectation be of what they could finish at the end of first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter for this year, so that we can help hold them accountable for those kinds of things, figure out how to support them, but also understand sometimes for them things are going to come up that might slow or speed up that progress too. So monitoring that as well, along with what Sarah's sharing too. During this process, though, our English department has come up with some alternative choices that students are going to have, and you'll hear a little bit more about that when we get to the course book. But our 11th and 12th graders will be able to kind of use some of their learner profile background on themselves and figure out what would be some ways that would best meet their own personalities, their own learning styles, their own preferences of topics, and then also the standard-based grading parts of that within our English choices. We are continuing a great deal of discussion around just grading policies. When you're looking at different standards, what does a B mean? What does a D mean? What does passing mean? Those kinds of things are all very deep conversations that our staff are highly engaged in and will continue to do through this course of this year. We've shared with them a list of some things, topics that we want to make sure that they have decided on as a department, and they're constantly giving us feedback, and we're helping to facilitate those conversations with them. And then, as you've heard from the rest of the levels too, SEL continues to be a strong need that we see needing to be addressed, as we're also going to be moving towards the eventual homeroom. We're still addressing a lot of those and working on what those needs are within our current student services, our current RTI structure, special ed structure, those kinds of things, and helping to facilitate staff in being able to have those conversations in the class as well. Questions about any of that?
How do you bring children in to this? So our children in high school think like they're rounding third base, right? Trying to go home. But some of them are still on first base. And trying to, get them to focus on what.
It's interesting, Pedro, because for these last couple of years, we've been really functioning with what we have at the high school level. But as you start watching our 8th and 9th graders, or 9th and 10th graders right now that have gone through the learner profile student-led conferences at the middle school, they have a deeper knowledge of what that learner profile is than our juniors and seniors. And so when you watch this whole train progressively get stronger and stronger as they go through, by the time they get to high school, some of that will just be natural thinking for them that isn't right now. So as our staff are learning it, our students are learning it as well. But it's exciting to see the benefit of what's already being done. And I think at every level you can kind of watch some of that, but especially when you watch that coming from one building to the next, too.
Oh, good to hear. Thank you.
Mr. Richard.
You recall the old Sesame Street song? Some of these things are not like the others. As usual, I'm a little different. So I left you a folder. And so I'm going to do a shameless plug. We have an open house coming up November 7th. Please use this bookmark. I can get some for you, okay? And if you come as board members, we had our 50th anniversary shirt printed with all of our courses. You have to come to the open house to get one, however. So, Pedro, if you ask me too many hard questions, you're off. All right?
I already got them ready.
Oh, no. All right. So the reason I said that, we're not quite like the others, Fox Valley Career Center is a cooperative venture of 8 high schools and 7 districts. And so we don't have any one district that we are tied to, which means that our plans are always a little different. And so one of the reasons I gave you this packet really was just this little sheet to let you know kind of how we picked the goal that we had this year, really for school improvement. And so it's really based on trying to get at least 60% of our students to earn a professional certificate. And so I had somebody ask me earlier, well, why would that be a goal? And so Perkins 5, Fox Valley actually does not receive Perkins money. Kaneland High School does, and actually all of our high schools do. But Perkins 5 is the high school CTE funding mechanism. And I gave you the 5 main organizational goals for Perkins 5, but you'll notice that number 1 is an increase in post-secondary and industry-based credential attainment. And so this ties right in with that. In the next 2 slides, you're going to see a number of the certificates that our students can earn. But in our programs, if you're in an automotive program, you're definitely going to sit for the ASE brake test. But then based on your skill level and where you want to take that, you may sit for the electrical, you may sit for powertrain, and we're going to pay for it, okay? We wrote that into our CTEI grant, so we'll pay for it, but we want you to leave with a professional certificate that you can use. Obviously, if you're in cosmetology, the whole goal is that you're going to graduate with that state license. And so with our programs, that's really our goal, is that you're going to leave with a skill that you can take either to a community college, and many of our community colleges are now reaching a stage where they are going to offer credit for that credential because it's a sign of what you've learned. Or if you're going to go into a career, it opens that door when you're trying to fill out the job application. All right? So, Sarah, you can go through the next couple if there's any of those you didn't recognize. Obviously, I wrote national certification, by the way, for the emergency medical technician basic. There's 2 exams right now. There's a state and a national. Illinois is actually going to accept the national. Illinois generally has to be a little different, and so we prepare our students for the national, and Illinois is going to actually get rid of their basic and use the national exam. And the nice thing about that is that it means our students have that. It's portable, and they can take that anywhere. All right? So that's the reason that that's one of our goals. And I wanted to highlight another piece on the bottom of your sheet there. I just noted our focus last year. We work with 3 community colleges, and I know a couple of you work with Wabansie, so that's probably our primary here. We also work with Elgin Community College, and we work with Kishwaukee Community College. And so, for instance, neither Elgin or Wabansie have a horticulture program, and Kaneland has a great horticulture program. And so Kishwaukee does. And so our students are able to earn 9 college credits taking the Fox Valley Horticulture Program with us. All right? The reason that we work with the multiple colleges as well is that our St. Charles schools and our Burlington Central schools are actually part of the Elgin Community College family. And so we have memos of understanding with all of them. Okay? What we do is we do coach our students a little bit just based on our colleges offer different things. So if you look at like the 3rd or 4th page in, I gave you last year's registration packet. We're finalizing this year's, and I have some of these extra, and I'm too cheap to throw them out, so I'm sharing them with you, so please enjoy them. If you look in there's a sheet, though, that's going to show you all the college credits that you can earn with Fox Valley classes. If you take fire science, and then typically a senior, you'd also take the EMT, you can earn 34 college credits in high school at $8 a credit. Okay? That's a great deal. So you've essentially earned a year of an associate's degree. And I just wanted to point out on the bottom, last year Fox Valley students earned 686.5 credit hours while at Fox Valley. All right? So just roughly assuming that's about $125 a credit, that's a savings of about $87,000 for our parents. All right? They didn't have to pay for those, but their children earn those credits. So that's a great benefit, and we're pretty proud of that. The other part, and this is something that I think we do really well, but for the Perkins, there's going to have to be a conversation with your community to look at a local needs assessment and how The classes that are offered in CTE help local communities and businesses meet their hiring needs. And as part of what we do, if I go to the next slide. Oh, you know what, you already were too fast. So we're working on a strategic plan this year. And if you look at the people that we work with, our business and industry partners, Valiz, who you're aware of, parents, students, instructors, alumni. Can I just say, by the way, not only is it our 50th anniversary, any guess on how many alumni we have now? We're over 24,000. Okay? So we've got a large pool of graduates who we're reaching out to, both short-term to get feedback on this, but also long-term, hoping that some of them, as they work in their businesses, are going to work with us on apprenticeships and internships and some of the areas we'd like to move to. So we're real excited that we have a great pool of people committed to Fox Valley to work with. Those are really, I just wanted to let you see how this fits in, how the data that we collect will help our home schools, because they'll need that for their Perkins grants, and then how I think it's a real good sign of what we're doing with our students. So, questions? Be nice.
So as you know, things change.
Yes.
Over time, and it's a great number of programs that you have here and such. Are we always searching for that new change for tomorrow's children, if you will?
Oh, absolutely.
And if so, do we expect some changes to add on to this, or?
Sure. So 2 years ago, we started piloting a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning program, HVAC, as part of our second-year electrical. So it's not large at this point, but our local HVAC companies are incredibly excited with that. So a week and a half ago, we had our CEO conference, our Career and Educational Opportunity Conference, and I was very excited. One of the counselors from St. Charles came. We always invite them to come and kind of see what we're doing. He went to the HVAC. The business that was presenting shared about one of this counselor's former students who finished our HVAC program, interned with them, they hired him. He worked the entire summer season. He was going to come to the conference with us, but they had sent him instead to Alabama, and they were paying for his further schooling to bring him back and give him a raise going into the furnace season. And so he said, I am so excited to go back and share with my colleagues, this is what's happening. So HVAC is something new. We're piloting this year a cybersecurity program in our computer area. So one of the things that we try to do is whenever we get our business partners here. So for instance, after we got the folks in this last time and they spoke and we were feeding them lunch, I pestered them about what do you see in the future for your field? What would you like to see? What areas can we work on with the students? And then we'll try to go forward with those areas and see what the next step is. So we do try to do that. If you come at the open house, I'll show you a list of some of the programs we offered when we started. Has anybody here used touch shorthand? Not lately? Okay.
Not anymore.
So, but you did?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, okay.
Long time ago.
So we've got a number of programs over the years that obviously we've phased out, and others we bring in, and we try to do that based both on enrollment and also where the field's going. We don't want to teach students something that is not going to be of any use to them in the future.
Correct.
Any other questions? You've been a great audience. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have a touch shorthand book in my office, and my son is learning it during lunchtime. He's figured out how to say he has grand hatred for certain things in touch shorthand, so it's still available.
And all he knows about it, right?
Yeah. Many of the things you've heard about in the different grade spans, this is a list of it as well. The one thing that hasn't been discussed is the partnership with the Institute for Personalized Learning. On September 20th, we had a member come from the Institute, visit many of our classrooms across the district, early childhood through 12th grade, and conduct an audit on our practices. We recently just got the audit report back, and we'll be looking at that audit report and taking their feedback of where are our areas of strength and where are our areas that we need to improve and how can we improve it. And then they work with us to write some action plans as well. Overall, in meeting with Katie Somerville from the Institute, just in a brief short debrief, a brief debrief is what I was going to say. She was very impressed with our work at Kaneland and how much we've done in such a short amount of time. She works with districts that have been doing personalized learning implementation for up to 15 years now. And so her initial reaction was kudos to Kaneland and where we're at. And it's a great place to really be in order to continue to move forward and make some progress for students. All of these things that we are working on, the 2 school improvement goals and the other actions, do have sessions at the Ignite conference on November 25th. I know the invitation was in the consent agenda. We have a wonderful keynote speaker, PJ Kaposi, that comes on that day that you're all invited to, as well as any of the breakouts on these as well. It is all housed at Kaneland High School this year. Questions for Patrick and I at all, or any of the speakers?
I got one from Mr. Virtual. Sorry.
Yes, sir.
Have you seen what Jill described earlier? Has you seen the transition come through? And I know other schools do what our school is doing as far as having the children know themselves, if you will. Have you seen that come through, some of that aspects of it?
I would say Kaneland is much further than any of my other schools in terms of working on that as a specific goal. So only my Kaneland students would use that language. I think that, as both Jake mentioned, and there's been this continuing theme, the whole social emotional aspect of learning, there's been a lot of focus on that, and that's been an area that everybody's struggling in across the board. And so I think what I'm seeing in most of our areas is that our students are much, they're much more willing to talk about what they need. You know, the days of kind of come in and do what we tell you and move on, that really is, those days are gone, and that's a good thing. So, so let's take a welding class. What you're seeing is where the students would want to come in and weld. They're also now asking about the why of the process and where does this go. And I struggle with this kind of weld is, how can I get better at that? And so I think that's where I'm seeing it. But only the Kaneland students would use that language because they're the only school I have that's officially working on that, although I know other schools have talked to you guys in the area. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
I think even going down to, I've been in some of the rooms here at the middle school where we're talking about some of those CTE programs and some of the stressors that come with what comes after high school, what programs can we get to. Students, I think, are seeing a broader scope of opportunities for them of I can get into the CTE field, I can get into HVAC and have a really good life. I'm taking the right steps. So those conversations are starting to happen even now down in some of our industrial arts classes of looking at things differently, of opportunities differently that our school provides.
Do we still see the competition between the children, right?
You're always going to see competition between the children, I think. Yep, and we're harnessing it in different ways. I think we're really trying to push kids for that intrinsic piece. You're going to have the competitors, and for some kids, that's going to be absolutely fantastic. I think one of our tasks is to be able to provide a wide variety of opportunities for kids.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
While that took a while for the presentation, the excitement level that they have putting it together, it's hard to, you talked about harnessing it, to harness it and make it shorter because there's so many things that go above and beyond this part of it. It's a comprehensive school improvement plan, and I know one of the goals we had talked about was a board trying to target and minimize, shorten certain presentations to allow more time for questions, but this one is one that because it drives what we do throughout the whole year and for all of our goals, we didn't feel like this one should be shortened at all. So thank you for your time, and even with as long as it was, there's hours and hours and hours that go into putting it together and actually creating those goals. So thank you very much for coming out tonight, and thank you for all your work.
I think it was time well spent.
Thank you. We agree.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right, so J2, discussion of high school coursebook changes proposal.
Yep, Mr. Raleigh will come up and he'll share this. And if you recall, tonight's going to be an overview. He's going to give a lot of information and some feedback. Action is not taken on this tonight. If there are questions that need to be answered, they can be answered between now and the next meeting. Or there have been a few times where at the next meeting, the person in Patrick's role at services has come back to answer those. Otherwise, it'll come back in consent for the board for approval at the next meeting with the courses that we've talked about tonight.
So we're going to go through our high school course booklet. So we have Kristen, Jill, and Carrie here from the high school. It seems like right when we get into the school year, we're already putting a team together of our administration and our staff to look at a responsive curriculum. So we take a look at the courses that we offer. We take a look at the needs of our students, and we make sure that the course book we put out, registrations for our 8th graders that are going to be coming into freshmen, is right around the corner. So we want to make sure that we have a very up-to-date course offering for our students to be able to meet their needs. So this is going to look at some of the changes. So for your information, we have 3 new classes that are currently, for the 19-20 school year, are currently not offered. We have 2 where we're going to be asking for a name change, and then 2 prerequisite changes. So 4 courses that currently exist that we're going to be looking at some changes, and then 3, we're going to introduce 3 new courses, possibly for the 20/21 school year. And then when that's done, just new in this role of filtering some information that's come, just touching base on some of the things that aren't necessarily changes to courses or curriculum, but some updates on where we're at with some opportunities moving forward. So do you mind actually clicking? The first one, and you guys have, this was shared out in the board packet, even if you go to the next one, is looking at, we're just going to jump right into, Sarah, you can advance to the next slide, some courses that will be new offerings for the 20/21 school year. The first one is going to be an advanced placement class. It's going to be, the course would be AP Computer Science A. In looking at the offerings that we have, so we have a Comp Science, Computer Science 1, and a Computer Science 2, and then students can go and choose an elective of AP Computer Science Principles. What we were finding, is that a lot of the information and curriculum covered in that AP Computer Science Principles were things that were being covered in Computer Science 1 and Computer Science 2. So AP Computer Science is more commonly accepted at the college level, so those kids that go through and take that AP test, it is more accepted at that AP Computer Science A class, and the curriculum is going to change in kind of the sequence that we cover that. Comp Science 1 and 2 will cover what they're covering, and then this proposed class would go more in depth in some different principles, in coding, in computer tech, some of those things. So the curriculum offered is a little bit different, but we're not cutting anything else. We just kind of took a look at it and say we need to revise this because some of the AP Comp Science Principles curriculum is already being covered in 1 and 2 for computer sciences. So that would be the first proposed class that we have.
Do we have that expertise in-house to teach this currently?
We do, yep, and it is, in hearing some of the things that Dr. Burchell was sharing, we wanted to take a look. We didn't want kids to have to pick between 1 and 2, or one or the other, excuse me. So this is a teacher that we currently have that is able to teach this, and it doesn't interfere with courses we currently offer or courses that students would choose from Fox Valley. It is in addition to what we currently have.
So this would be generally a junior, senior taken?
Yep.
Is this, when you're designing a curriculum, do you talk to someone like at Will Bonds or one of the other community colleges to design it so that it is available for dual credit?
College board design, college board.
Yep. So.
It's determined by college board.
So it's not dual credit, is what he was asking.
Right,
Yes.
right. And with the College Board for those AP classes, they're pretty strict on what the content is, the layout of the year, so there's not a lot of variance. And if we can't say, I really like, I can't give you an example, but I want to make that an AP class by making it really, really rigorous. The College Board only offers select courses, and we're pretty tied to what their curriculum is that are tied to those.
The College Board does align directly
directly to what colleges are having. They outline their things based on what that sports college.
Carrie, microphone. I'm sorry.
I'll give you a wireless one.
Please.
The next two courses are going to, the proposal would be for them to be electives in our CTE department for next year. And next year, we would do some data collection there, but it would be an Introduction to Agriculture 1. And then the second course in that field would be Introduction to Agriculture 2. There's a lead in there for students to be able to take some more in-depth agricultural courses. And what we are going to do through the CTE department, and as these are offered next year, start to collect some data on with thinking that this might be an opportunity for some crossover credit. It's going to be through a math and science lens, so it's going to be ag through the math and science. It aligns to what the National Agricultural Course Standards are, but through that exploration next year, when we come back next year for the 21/22 school year, there might be an opportunity for students to use these one or both of these classes as part of their science credit. But that will be information that we share with you in the year to come. Currently, it's going to be offered through our CTE department. We have a pretty popular horticulture program, and this would be just another pathway that students would have the opportunity to take.
When you say it could in the future count for a science class, is that towards a high school requirement or a college requirement or both? Like if the high school puts it in science, will a college automatically, if they need a 3-year science requirement, would it automatically go that direction, or is there anything else you need to consider once you're thinking about how a college will look at it?
Looking at it, it would possibly count for one of their science credits. It would not, through that same lens that we were just talking about, as a dual credit, it would not count towards a college science credit, but as possibly as one of their options for a science credit here at Kaneland.
The high school.
Yep.
Does this have some flavors of our future farmers of America that we have, the crew that we have here?
Mm-hmm. And I believe, and Carrie can speak to that a little bit more, that FFA was introduced through horticulture, correct? So now as that ag field grows a little bit more, this would focus more on that piece as opposed to the horticulture side of that. Any other questions? So those would be, so Ag 1, Ag 2, and then the Computer Science A would be the 3 new courses that currently are not offered. They would be new for students for next year. The next course, go ahead.
Will we know later on what the AP Computer Science class will have in it?
Numbers-wise?
What you're intending to teach within that class?
The curriculum, we can come back to you with that, yep. It's in the course booklet, okay.
It is prepared already.
Gotcha. I will be sure to share that with you.
Patrick, the Ag 1 and Ag 2.
Yep.
At this point, they're just being proposed as courses, or are they also being proposed as replacement courses for science curriculum?
They are not being proposed as replacements, they're just additional courses.
Just additional
Yep.
courses. But in the future, that might be something that they're looking at, is that
Correct, that's what that
understood?
department is going to look at next year, yep.
Okay.
So are these going to be full classes?
They
Like
are
new FTEs?
0.5 credits, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
It's a semester each. For the ag.
Yep.
So there are any teachers for this, right?
We have the teachers, yep.
You have the teachers.
Mhm.
And to hop on over to this and they leave another course that we need teachers there? Not to go to details with it, but,
Course selection.
Numbers of kids that choose to enroll.
okay. Just trying to forward look.
I think I would be interested to see, after this gets on the books.
Yep.
How that would function as a replacement for the current science courses. Specifically, the principles of science and the content that is in science, and are those being truly met in these courses? And we don't do that tonight, but I just think in the future that might be something we would definitely want to think about.
Yep.
We do have that, she does have the ways of that manufacturing.
Yeah, so okay, then I would definitely. Yeah, awesome.
The next two courses, if you go to the next slide, are taking a look at some name changes. Some of these pieces, specifically to the name changes, are driven by some state policy. So if you go to the next one, the first one, the current course name we have is Biological Science Applications in Agriculture, or excuse me, in Animal Science. We are proposing, can you click to the next slide, sir? The name change to that is going to simplify that a little bit, and the course offering will be changed to Animal Science. This does align to a change that the ISBE has made already. In future coding with this would be more to that streamlined Animal Science name as opposed to the lengthier one you can see in green up there. So this is kind of rooted in some of the state changes that have come through. Content is the same, curriculum is the same, teacher will be the same, course progression will be the same. It's just simply the name shortening, simplifying that name. It's a bit of a mouthful. The next one, again, is in response to the Post-Secondary and Workforce Readiness Act. There's that PWR Act is essentially a four-pronged approach to preparing kids for college and community, and one of those pieces speaks specifically to transition math. What we had in the course handbook was described as college algebra, and we didn't feel that was the most accurate representation of what that course was. So in working with Waubonsie and getting feedback, we needed to drop that college piece. So we rewrote that name as an introduction to STEM math. This would be typically taken after an Algebra 2. So I would go Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, and then as a senior I could take an intro to STEM math. What is nice about this and working with Waubonsie Community College is that students that pass this course would then have the opportunity to go to Waubonsie, and they would enter right into a credit-bearing math class as opposed to an introductory class their freshman year at Waubonsie and not being able to earn that college credit. So this piece, working with the community college, would allow them to go into that credit-bearing class their first year at Waubonsie. Again, the content has not changed, with the caveat that this year we are reviewing our entire 6-12 math curriculum. So any changes that came to this course would come in conjunction with just our general math curriculum review. But it's going to be the same for the most part, the same content. Again, same teacher. It doesn't affect our staffing pattern. It would just affect that name and the opportunities our kids have moving forward with Waubonsie.
So we allowed Waubonsie to change our name, to change our course name?
It's coming off of that post-secondary, right, that PWR Act, and then feedback from them. It is not it's a little bit more transparent, I guess, in what that offering is. It's not college math is not a college math course. And having that name for a student to opt into might give the false impression that they're getting college credit for that. So that was some of the feedback that we took, that we need to drop the college piece out of it, and it really is introducing them to college level math, but it is not a college course.
And did we query other junior colleges around here with that? Did they have the same feedback?
Not that, go ahead.
Part of the Post-Secondary Work Act is part of an overall kind of directive from the state as a whole. And so part of what we have set up is we've been working with Waubonsie for the past 2 years in developing this and getting this set up and actually working back and forth with them. So it's not just us, it's all the schools around that work with their local community college for this. So this is not just us, this is everybody at the high school level that works with their community college for this act. So you set it up that way, so that you actually have your kids go into credit-bearing courses, which means they don't have to take 0 level and pay money and not earn anything when they get to their math courses at the college level.
Is introduction to STEM going to be like a common terminology for other?
It could be. It's something that they originally had something a little bit different and it was confusing. And so we, as a committee at the high school, were kind of like, what about this? And kind of went back and forth and it worked out well. So it could be something. It's just sort of dependent upon, one of our math teachers is on the Illinois Post-Secondary Work Readiness Act thing, the group that actually debriefs all this throughout the state. So he had a lot of good feedback for us and was able to actually help with some of that layout and then talk with Wabansie and kind of merge with that together.
The next name change is kind of parallel to that, they a little bit working in conjunction, but working and changing our name from Transitions to College Math more to Transitions to Algebra 2. And this corresponds to where this course falls in our course offerings. So again, that natural progression is Algebra 1, geometry, and then into Algebra 2, and then students have an option of taking a fourth year of math. Typically, it's a pre-calc, it's an AP calc, and what we're seeing is that there's a group of students, there's a lot covered between Algebra 1 and Algebra 2, so this course is intended before I get to that higher level of Algebra 2, this is a course that is going to work with some of those higher concepts as their math course. So this would be taken after geometry, prior to going into Algebra 2, and then students would have the option of electing into that Algebra 2 course if they choose a fourth year of math.
Is this based on a year or is this a semester type thing?
It's a year course.
Okay.
Yep. And again, working away from, just for transparency, and so students are most informed, working away from that college math. It is not a credit-bearing class for college, so we wanted to work that college level, that college name out of the name to Transitions to Algebra 2. Again, naturally where it falls in with our math progression at the high school.
So we, just details. So we dropped algebra, and now we go straight to Algebra 2?
Nope, we have not dropped algebra. So the students would take Algebra 1, then go into geometry, and the students that identify with needing a little bit more support prior to going to Algebra 2, they would take this course, this Transitions to Algebra 2, as their third year of math. Upon successful completion, then they could go into Algebra 2, what would be their senior year, their fourth year.
Do we really need that many transitions of different types of maths? I mean, I'm just asking. I mean, is that many different levels that?
Well, this is a course we already have, right? We're just changing the name.
Correct. Yep.
Is it? Okay.
Yep.
Oh, I thought it was additional. I'm sorry. Nope, never mind. Thank you.
And then the last two courses are looking at prerequisite changes. Again, content's the same, curriculum's the same. The first one, looking at that AP Physics 1 course, there is a current prerequisite that involves the recommendation of the AP Physics teacher, and we wanted to remove that piece out of there. That is the time and intensity it takes to go through and fully vet for that AP Physics teacher is not it's not a system that we wanted to have in place when we can go with more concrete data that would give us a better picture of students that would fall into this AP Physics course. So we would remove the recommendation of that one teacher and looking at either the Algebra 2 and physics completion or the Algebra 2 and the B- average or greater in the previous math and science classes. So it wouldn't strictly rely on the recommendation of a teacher. It would look more on the body of work of these students in these classes.
Are there a lot of courses that require the recommendation of a teacher? I guess I've never sat down and read through the catalog, so I don't know how that is.
As an explicit prereq, there's not a lot. The voice of teachers is value, and I think that's certainly part of the discussion, but as strictly the recommendation off of that teacher, coming to mind, I can't think of.
There aren't too many.
So I guess, is this in a bigger sense, is this something you're getting away from across the catalog, or is this just?
So it's like an overall process of trying to remove some of those pieces where it may have been something that is seen by some as a person choosing or picking and choosing, and so kind of look for outside parts that can go into that. And so with this is actually opens up the option for them of kids to be able to do that, and looking at just math and science as a whole. So we do have some that have teacher recommendation, but a lot of times what that is done is because it's AP courses, and it's looking for some type of background information that either College Board requires or that we found over the course of time of our data. We need a couple things to put in there, but we are doing kind of an overview of our AP course as a whole and looking at those prerequisites and saying what is actually that happens. So.
You might have answered it somewhere along the way.
Okay,
but
sorry, I
I'm
may
not
have
sure.
talked in circles.
So are you trying to get rid of all of the teacher?
No, we're not trying to get rid of that. What we're trying to do is fine tune based on what we are finding out with our kids, on who's coming through and what we have.
Okay, so why is this one different from others if you're removing the teacher's recommendation versus other classes that are, I know that we're not doing it tonight.
Yeah.
But is it,
We have, because actually what's happening is this teacher sits down and combs through all the students' data and actually crunches all the numbers for their grades, which he has found to be very overwhelming and is very challenging for him to do. And so with actually going back to the science class and the science department as a whole, having this conversation about this would be a little bit easier to manage, as well as still keeping it open for kids that would be able to get into previous math or science. So he could actually use that a little bit easier.
all right, so it's going to be on a case-by-case basis as to which courses get rid of the teacher requirement?
We're not getting rid of the teacher requirement. What we're saying is that we're reviewing those. We may be phasing them out. In this one, it's based on just recommendation. We have other courses, but we're actually looking at this to make it a little bit more open.
Okay, we're not, something I'm not making sense here to me.
Okay.
Are you doing that with other courses, like the English? Do any of the English department ones have teacher recommendation, and over the course of the next couple of years, are you reviewing that process in other departments besides?
Yes.
Is that what
Yes,
you're
we're reviewing, yes.
Okay, but that
Yes.
does say that you're no longer, that the teacher recommendation is going away based on the language you've got up there.
For what they're asking for as a science department, they want it to be open so that they actually have a group of people going through and doing that for the B- part.
Okay.
So the teacher's no longer going through all the data manipulation or whatever, or gathering.
He's not physically going through each
He or
individual
she
piece.
is going to say, if you got a B, you're good to go.
I
That's what I'm
think
saying.
what Carrie's trying to allude to is that we will always respect the teacher's input on what's a good placement for students. It's just a part of the picture, not the whole picture. And in this situation, there was a lot more that was being put in on the responsibility of the teacher to go back and assess all of those pieces that we aren't doing in any other place in our building.
Okay, and here's the question I'm trying to ask. The language on the screen says that it's based on the recommendation of the teacher. That phrase is not in the second part of it. So does that mean the teacher, I mean, we're not saying teachers aren't important, we're just saying you have to get recommended by the teacher in the first part, and in the second part it's saying it's based on your grades. Is that correct?
There's a piece of that where I can see where the language would be. Part of what happens with that course selection process is that he would still have an input.
That's not right, because it doesn't say he still will, it says based on his grades.
So, yeah, we'd have to go back and clarify as to what that's what the science department had in regards to what they would like to have in there for opening up.
So which is it?
We'll revisit that and
Yep.
either send you an update, or we'll make sure we highlight it when we send more information back for the next board meeting in the course book.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep.
And to put it bluntly, so we're making it easier on teachers? Is that what it is?
No,
Or
that's
no,
not
you're-
what I'm saying. I'm just,
No.
it's still, I was,
Yours is more about the process,
Yeah, and I think this class has moving parts with both math and
science.
science. So maybe it does need to be looked at again, just to see how those two things mirror together. But I think, because you need strengths in multiple areas for this class. Because some of these kids can skip a class to get into the AP, and so I think they really look at some past.
I think what they were also trying to clarify is on this first one, it says has shown high levels of success. Well, what does that mean?
okay.
This definition is trying to define that is completed algebra 2 and has a B average or greater in previous math courses. This is something that the family and the student could look at their own records and determine, instead of the physics teacher having to be the one to do that.
Because the second piece of that is you're skipping physics and going straight into AP physics. That's when that kicks in. So before, if you wanted to skip physics, you needed the AP teacher to say you could.
Correct.
And this
It's
one
just
just says
how
you have
you
to have a
can-
B average or greater in previous method. Yeah. Yeah. That'd be interesting.
And the last prerequisite proposal is for our AP Human Geography course. Currently, the prerequisite for that is based on a GPA. And what we found is typically the majority of students taking the AP Human Geography course are freshmen that don't have an established GPA to high school. So we are looking more, this kind of goes back to counterintuitive to what we were just saying. This is looking more at teacher recommendation. And the caveat to that piece is that AP Human Geography through the College Board and the intent of this course looks at this more of an introduction to AP level coursework. And in all of the different AP courses that are offered, Human Geography is the one that students tend to have the most schema on. It's not heavy into socio-political issues, things like that. It's looking at topics that most of them come with the background knowledge to have those discussions. So it is looking at an intro to AP level rigor for what are the majority freshmen. So we're looking at taking away that GPA because they haven't established that, where most of our AP classes fall in sophomore, junior, senior level courses. This one typically falls and is filled up by freshmen. So we're looking to take that GPA piece away and go more towards that teacher recommendation for this course.
How would that mechanism work for an 8th grade student that wants to sign up for this class?
There's times where we have those conversations between our 8th grade teams and our high school teams. We have those times set up. Yep.
So when I think they have a schedule that in math, your 8th grade math teacher signs off. So it would be your 8th grade social studies teacher that signs it? Is that the teacher?
Guidance counselors, there's a team that.
Besides that one teacher?
Yep.
So we dropped the word college from other classes to not be misleading, but we're saying that this is an intro to AP. Isn't that the same concept? Should we still be calling it AP if it's not actually?
It is an AP course because it comes from the College Board. So again, there's a little bit different as opposed to a Kaneland class that we create. This is a third party that is saying you can offer these courses, but you need to cover this content in order to get AP credit for college credit for that. So it's a little bit different than what our in-house courses are. We're a little bit bound to what the College Board has.
So by introduction, I think the idea here is more of an introduction to AP in general. So it'd be one of their first classes they could take as a freshman. So it's not introduction to AP, it's an introduction to the idea of AP coursework.
Why does that happen at the freshman level? Why are we introducing them to AP courses as a freshman?
It's common.
It seems.
And that's ultimately, that's why human geography is at the freshman level, because College Board recommends that is a foundational piece to actually get you started in it. And so it's the only course that we offer at an AP level for freshmen.
So that's common throughout school districts?
Yes. Correct, yes, yes. And sophomores can also take it too, so it's not only freshmen, it's between those two, but predominantly our freshmen do take it because it's there. And ironically, it's actually our highest scoring one that scores 3 and above for our human geography, our freshmen are, so.
So it's introductory, it's not actually an AP class, or is it an AP class?
It is an AP class, yes.
So our freshmen will be able to take that test in spring, whatever that is, or do they qualify to take it as a freshman?
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously get.
Carrie, why don't you just stay there?
So,
I'm getting lots of steps in.
No, sorry. So yes, as I just said, the AP Human Geography, actually, our kids take that test. That is the highest percentage of our AP classes that get 3s and above. We actually had I think we had 15 kids get 5s. So we have a really good production in the AP process for those freshmen. It's our high achieving, or freshmen and sophomores, I should say. It's usually those higher achieving, but it is the only AP course that we offer for freshmen because we do not necessarily encourage kids to pile up on AP. We don't want that.
I mean, and if you take this as a freshman, are there any AP classes offered for sophomores?
Yeah. English.
Not
What's
many.
after that? No, not English. No, math and science if they double up. I'd have to get my course book
But
out.
it's almost, it seems like it.
It
could
does
maybe
have
get there.
a,
It does
yes,
happen, but
it does have
it
a, it
skips
does
on
have a
junior year.
progression. And it's not, there's not a push one way or the other. It is a piece where, like Patrick said, eighth grade teachers talk, and we actually have a sit down and talk about who might get moved into that. And then they converse back and forth about what that looks like. So we do not encourage kids to, take 5 or 6, like we want them to take as many as they feel comfortable with, but at the same time be in a point where they are.
Can be successful. with
Yes,
them.
exactly, yeah.
So what if you do have that child wants to challenge themselves and take as many AP classes as they can?
Then we let them, but we also make sure that we go through and have a conversation with the parents and the students about what that looks like, what it means for their workload, what it means for other things that they're doing outside of school, family, et cetera. That's all actually big conversation that Student Services has with kids.
Okay.
So you'll have them. There's going to be those kids. The last piece on here, before we open it up for any further discussions, just a couple things that have been on our radar that we wanted to discuss. Number one, taking a look at our foreign language options in the offerings that we have. So currently, in order to graduate, you need to have 2 credit hours in foreign languages. And what we have is a very well selected course for Spanish, and that goes all the way through an AP offering with Spanish 4. And we also have those current offerings in French. What we have seen over the course of the last 4 or 5 years is the numbers in French have really started to wane off, especially at that French 3 and French 4 level. In the course book, and we wanted to bring it here to get some feedback from the board as far as direction is considered, but looking at that French offering in particular, the reason that this is on just as further discussion is that we currently have it in our course book as a four different offerings. So a French 1, 2, 3, 4. In working with our guidance counselors and our plan moving forward, because of the way those numbers play out and the decreased enrollment, we were looking at the AP French test that was taken, and I think there were 2 students that took that. In 5-6 years ago, it was in the teens or 20s. So we're seeing the popularity or the attendance in those classes wane a little bit. We do have kids currently in the high school that are on that trajectory for that French 3 and French 4. So we want to be able to continue to offer that to those that have started that course selection with that as that end goal or with that in mind. So our intent is to keep French 1 and 2 as course offerings for students to fulfill those 2 credits of foreign language. With our freshmen coming in next year, working with our guidance counselors, our plan would be to let them know that those are your French opportunities are going to end after a French 2 course. And it would remain, the French 3 and the AP French 4 would remain in our course book while the current high school students play out through that, with that caveat that, again, we want to make decisions that are best for our students, but also financially sound and make the most sense. And if those numbers continue to trail off, then we would look at not having that French 3 and French 4 as a course offering. For those outliers, it's not that opportunity is going away. It would just be offered in a different manner. There are opportunities for kids to take those courses online. There's opportunities to partner with the community colleges for those. If I am one of those 2 students that really wants that AP French credit, I would have that opportunity. It might not just be in a Kaneland classroom. As we do that, working with our foreign language department to see, is there a different language that is going to be impactful for our students that we need to look into offering as a new course. There's research out there that says French is the way to go with the way that some of the businesses are playing out worldwide and some of the big players that are coming through worldwide. There's groups and camps that talk about Mandarin as a language that's going to be impactful here. There's groups that talk about German. So really putting a focus to that to see what offerings do we want to take or to offer to our students in order to make them really college ready, career ready, in looking at that full process of, do we stick with Spanish because it is very, very well selected, it's very well attended, and then for those one-offs or a couple that are interested in the Mandarins or the Germans, do we offer those through an online course? Do we offer those with partnering with community colleges? So really investigating what that looks like. But when you look at that French piece, I know that was a topic of discussion in the Ed Service Department in the years past. So we wanted to just kind of update you on where we are with that. The other piece is dual credit offerings. It was great to hear from Dr. Burchell about some of those savings. And when I hear $87,000, that is hugely impactful for our community. So the intent of our Ed Service Department is to be able to offer more dual credit classes. We're at a point where we're getting to that ability to offer those. But we need a couple things to continue to happen. Illinois is now going to allow teachers to be certified or endorsed as a dual credit instructor. But in order to do that, they need to go through and get accredited to teach that class. That usually involves about 18 credit hours through them going and taking college work. In the way, the partnership that we have with Waubonsie is once they get to that halfway mark, if a teacher goes and they take 9 of those 18 hours to get them accredited to teach the dual credit offerings here at Kaneland, we can start to offer that as long as that teacher provides a professional development plan on how they're going to continue and get those other 9. If it is a course that we want to offer that necessarily is not offered by Waubonsie, and we want to offer that with a connection to another university, there is a list of universities and the courses that we can offer. The downside to that is, as of right now, that teacher would need to get that full 18 hours before we can introduce that class. So we don't have the staff on hand right now to offer those for next year. That's why it's not in our course book. I've sat specifically with a couple teachers that are an hour or two away from being at that halfway mark where we can introduce it and put it into the course offerings for our students. Have been reaching out with some of the districts around our area in Kane County that have upwards of 10, 12 dual credit offerings. And it's just another opportunity for our kids to enter into college with some credits built up. It has a huge financial impact. So that's another piece that we're investigating and starting to fine tune so we can offer those in the near future.
Question.
Yes.
Have you analyzed and have we attributed to the French interest because we now offer Spanish at the middle school? Hence, as they go into the high school, it's, hey, I already know this is a better selection for me.
The numbers actually for French have actually been going down longer than what we've offered Spanish at the middle school. And so it's been a steady decline over the course of the past probably 10, maybe even 10 years or so.
Significantly in the last 5 or 6.
Yeah, last 5 years it's really dipped, and it hasn't necessarily been, we didn't see a big, huge increase in Spanish and a drop from French. What we're seeing is a drop from French, a little increase in Spanish, but even with Spanish, we're kind of holding steady.
Okay, thank you.
When you were talking about French and other languages, you used words like intent and investigate. So is there an actual timeline of when these things are going to happen?
Not currently. We're looking to get some feedback from the board in this area and then sitting down. The conversations have happened with our world languages department for the need to look at those pieces. I think historically it's been the 2 popular languages of Spanish and French, and that's just kind of what we've done. But now that we see the staffing it takes for some of these class sizes that are steadily decreasing, and we're starting to see that pattern, looking into now is the time to see, is there a big push from their department for another opportunity for a different language, or is it just going to be, Spanish is popular enough, I can get my 2 foreign language credits through that and be done with it. And then, like I said, for those students that do have special interest in select languages, more than likely, we would have the opportunity to provide that through a college or a program. So it is sitting down and meeting with that department chair and that department as a whole and looking at what those would be. I don't have a specific timeline for you. If we're meeting next week, we do meet with department chairs often. And this is something, again, looking, I guess, because this is me being new to this position and knowing that this is a conversation that's happened in the past of needing to chart that out, but I don't have a specific timeline for you right now.
I would think that you would need to reach your decision about French 3 and 4 before the kids start signing up for classes next year.
It will be in there, but our guidance counselors working with the kids coming in as of right now, those incoming freshmen would only have the opportunity for a French 1 and a French 2.
So you already have done that.
So part of what would take place with the French and looking at 3 and 4 is that we still have course selection to go through, so we don't know, right now at this point, it is on the books, and we may find that we only have 5 kids sign up, and then that would be a section that we would not run.
But that's going to push it back another year if you don't tell them. If you don't tell the 8th graders now that they're only going to have 2 years of French available, you're pushing this back another year.
That's part of the conversation there, is that the conversations to totally remove it have not been, it's more of sharing the information with you guys. It hasn't been decided to like totally, well.
Which brings me back to what's the timeline so this doesn't get pushed out another year?
The timeline I'm referring to is specifically of that investigation, that piece of those other languages to offer has not happened yet.
But you also mentioned a scenario where you have the onesies that they're in the system already, where you want to give them the opportunity to do their 3 and 4, if you will, and those will materialize where you don't have that, hence closing the door.
I think the person that looks at course selection and student requests, one of the options that really has been very different about French than any other course that we offer, even in a sequence, is we have continued to say we're offering it no matter the number of students that sign up for it. In any other course, we really would look at based on the needs of the students and then balancing that with our financial needs, we would make the decision in our recommendation for approval from all of you in our staffing patterns. With French 3 and 4, it has consistently been that we will offer it no matter what. So it really is a unique situation for French 3 and 4 versus any other course that we have.
All right, you just threw another wrench into the whole thing.
Okay.
When do you close that out?
The course selection?
Yes, for 3 and 4.
So January. So our 8th graders.
Wait, let's go back to the scenario I mentioned earlier. This gentleman mentioned that there is a onesies and twosies that are in the system right now.
Correct.
That we're gonna allow them to finish out if they want the 3 and 4, and then you're gonna revert to only 2, and if there's others that wanna continue, you'll have a different avenue for them.
And I think what I'm saying is that that's what we're asking for input from all of you on, because right now, French 3 and 4, there's currently, off the top of my head, 11 students in each of those. And there's 30 students in French 1. So the numbers are decreasing. Other courses that only 11 students requested, we would look at individually and say, is this something that we want to do a course offering for or not? When in the past, we've always just consistently said, we're going to do French 3 and 4 no matter the number. But I think with the fewer number of students actually taking the AP course and or earning the AP credit for it in combination with
the dwindling
numbers and staffing,
So
that's why
those,
something
so
that we're
those
looking
30 you mentioned you got through the system, those are the ones you're gonna work through, and then eventually close the door. Yes, no, is there a plan for it?
Well, what I'm saying is that that's what we need feedback from all of you on.
That's what he just said the plan was earlier, that
Yeah.
we're gonna do, so you guys are not making sense, all of you are not making sense to me. There either is a plan to get rid of it in 2 years and tell the 8th graders that there isn't, or there isn't, and if there is a plan, when does it start?
The plan, the current plan, so those 30 that are currently in high school in that French one, So
freshmen this year?
Correct.
Okay.
We want to provide the opportunity for them to get into that 3 and 4. but we also have to monitor, there's a variety of different things that may come. Just because they're currently in French 1 doesn't mean that we can project them to be in French 4 in 3 years. So we need to look at that. So I guess we need to be.
You want the opportunity to give the kids that are freshmen now, when they looked at the catalog today, there's 4 years of French. So
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So if we want to change this, which is what I heard you say, when are you going to tell the 8th graders that there's only 2 years of French available?
Right now, while that registration piece starts in December.
So that's happening in December.
Correct.
Or do you need direction from us?
I guess we're looking
Which one
for,
is it?
That's our
I
recommendation.
apologize. That is our recommendation moving forward.
Okay, then, all right, that I didn't hear anywhere along the way. You said that we were investigating, we were thinking that this is what we want, but I didn't hear, this is official.
Wanting to bring it to you.
But this.
Course book.
This is just recommendation, so it'll come back to us between now and.
Well, it'll come back the November 11th meeting, I believe. Yep.
Okay.
Based
So
on
as
this
part of the conversation with the board,
Yep.
are we comfortable with 8th graders only having a 2-year option? And probably one of the things you're weighing is knowing that it's going to not be next year that another language would be offered. That's off the table.
Because they need time to figure out which of the.
Because that's, that
if or what.
timeline's still
Correct,
being worked out.
Yep.
And we'll
So
discuss
in
that.
reality, you conceivably can add something in 2 years, right?
I think that next year technically if they.
You could.
Could you even do next year?
We
Yeah,
could.
because then you have the 8th graders that want the 1 and 2. By the time they get to be juniors,
Yeah, we
they
we
have
wouldn't
another
necessarily be
option.
able to add for next year because the course book and what we have, like, we would have to come up with an entire curriculum and plan to actually implement it for next year, so. Year after, maybe. But that's, I think, where he was focused on the investigation of what could that potentially be, but the
Down the road.
recommendation would be with the French.
I think I would like to see, if we start phasing it out, so we do 1 and 2 years of French and we cap it there, I think that makes sense. But then what's plan B, which is what's the next language we're considering to add then to our curriculum, right? So is it Mandarin, is it something else? So I think it has to be coupled with that. Let's cut French and see what else.
Well, be
might
careful,
fit.
don't say cut to.
I'm sorry, cut 3 and 4.
Yeah, look at phasing just to the
Phasing it
first
out.
2 years.
Put a name
I don't want
to it.
anybody
Are there any negative consequences to students who are already fluent in Spanish, who maybe are looking for a different experience that will get caught in the middle of this, or is that not often? Do a lot of them?
we've had only 2 kids so far that we know that have jumped languages. Because like gone from that are fluent in Spanish and want to do French or have started in, is that what you're asking, like
Well,
took
like
Spanish
someone
and-
who's in a Spanish-speaking household, who enters high school and is like, some of them might enter a Spanish 3 and, still get a high school Spanish, because maybe speaking in your house isn't the same as
Correct,
the AP
yes.
test.
That would be, yes.
Or they like an easier class,
like
I don't know,
taking
some
English,
choices they
right.
might make. But I didn't know if any of those kind of landed themselves in French, if they feel like that's.
We actually have not. Students that are, whose home language is Spanish usually end up in Spanish. We might have 1 or 2 that end up in French, but predominantly
It's not a common theme.
And the irony is that it's like us taking English.
Exactly.
So it's
A
the
good
same,
course for them.
there's some conventions. in
Totally different.
Are there FTE implications if we make that decision to, what was
Phase.
I allowed to say?
To phase out
Phase
the
out.
top level?
Phase out the 3 and
Are there
4.
FTE implications?
It would depend.
It honestly depends on what those other students choose. And
Okay.
there is no real way to predict
Sure.
what they would choose. We always ask students to provide us with a second choice and a third choice option.
Sure.
And as Patrick was talking about, that 2-year world languages requirement, as you all know, is not a Kaneland High School requirement, but it is for many colleges. It's a year of world language, fine arts, or CTE is our high school requirement, but many students and families want to choose an option for 2 years to be able to get into a specific school.
And then it doesn't mean that they won't have to take that language again at college.
Correct.
Correct.
You had mentioned that there was the option of someone who wants to learn Mandarin, that you can maybe outplace isn't the right word, but there's other options available to them. So 3 years from now, if we end up with 3 kids in Spanish, or I'm sorry, in French 3, are we going to, is there the potential or the opportunity to outplace them somewhere?
It's already in our course book, and in fact, we have one student that's doing it right now because they are so high in a math level that we don't have anything to offer, so they take it at Wabansie, and we transfer their credit back in. There's a section in the course book and in our handbook that already has that aligned.
So we can do that with French also?
And
Yep.
last year, our valedictorian did that. He took French outside so that he could then take that, so that he could keep his journalism stuff.
If I recall correctly, we had that situation 2-3 years ago where there was
Almost
one
every-
student.
Yeah,
Almost
One
every
student,
year,
right?
there's several students.
Is there? Okay, 'cause I remember that one unique one where you guys had to make accommodations for that person.
I'm looking forward to dual credit, I will say that as well. I think that's a good offering to discuss more, but not to
I
only
think
talk about French.
the fact that Illinois is going to recognize that as an endorsement for teachers will help to start to,
That's great.
as we look at our hiring processes and our candidates coming in, that is going to be something that we'll be excited to be able to offer.
Do you know, are those 18 credit hours graduate level or undergraduate level?
I believe they're graduate, but I will confirm. Yep.
So in the dual one, you said if an individual is gone through half of the tenure of the, however many hours they need to take, if you will, that at that point we could offer that class.
Correct.
And expecting from them their plan to finish out.
Yep.
What if they don't? You're just gonna force them?
We would.
No, obviously you're gonna help them out.
Yep, and we've worked through these of what if, you know, that pool isn't gonna be huge when this starts out. So what if it's one teacher in one course and we have 25 or 30 kids that sign up for it in January and then life takes that teacher somewhere else, then it's a conversation we need to have with that group of students that course is not currently offered and where else can we insert them. I guess my hope is the conversations I have with teachers is that there is a growing interest in the opportunity to teach a dual credit class. So I'm hopeful that once we start to have that pool of teachers, that we can offer several different opportunities for them. But it's going to be something, unfortunately, that there's a little bit of reactiveness to that. As much as we can proactively plan, that it's going to be based on who those are that sign up, or if they decide, no, this isn't for me, I don't want to take those other 9. Most of the teachers that get into that, they know it's 18 credit hours when they get into it, and they're doing it for that specific purpose of being able to teach that, not as I'm moving up in the salary schedule. It's the intent to be able to offer that to students. So even that professional development plan can be, I'm going to finish out the courses that you've outlined for me in your course accreditation.
I've heard the terminology before. How common is a dual credit? It's not something new, right?
No. Working with a relatively close district, they offer, I think, 13 different courses and hundreds of students taking those in even just this first semester. So it's pretty common across high school.
We just don't have it.
I think it's the laws and regulations for teachers, for our staff to be able to, they've really opened that and loosened that up a little bit, so the opportunity is going to be there more for us.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess I'm just working through math in my head, or if the intention is to, and I think we agreed that we're going to limit French to 1 and 2, and the intention is to either investigate eliminating French altogether and replacing it with something else. There's got to be some sort of timeline in order to get that investigation done so you can get it into the course catalog when French is no longer, if that's what they decide to do, there's got to be some sort of schedule to work backwards. We move one and
I think I'm thinking some more similar, that if this comes back in November, if we're going to take an action, I know I would like another language to be
I would tend to agree with that. I don't
not
know
decided yet, but knowing maybe we have a year gap, but not like multiple year gaps. So that might be a part of the thinking, is what the timeline looks like. Not a decision, but a timeline. I think that I would agree with that.
Yeah, we're gonna.
Not to know what the answer
just
is,
for
but
example, if we're gonna start teaching German, and the kids have the option of tutors in French, but we need to get the 8th graders to sign up for German, there's gotta be some sort of time schedule.
So
Making sense?
Yeah, I can share a little bit. We have a little on that, thinking of the timelines we're just going through is our curriculum committee in the curriculum cycle that we have. And so starting in February, January, February, we meet as a group, and these are representatives from every department. And so if that's something that we talk about district-wide with world language, they would come and we would go through that cycle and vet and sort of talk about that. The timeline of what a potential, if there would be a potential language, that would be a little in there, maybe embedded or a little bit further out. But we would start in January, and then you actually look to review and go through and then share these things. So they would have, starting in January, could look at that cycle itself and how.
In January, is world languages up for review this year?
It wouldn't be a review piece. This is part of our curriculum within the building itself, how our curriculum cycle works through and how we implement, like how you're being presented with new courses.
Right.
That type of process there. It starts in January and circles its way around, and then we come here.
I think you're looking too narrow. I'm talking more big picture. So.
And that would be for us to look as a whole, as to, we would have to probably, I would say you'd have to, survey people, and we have to look at other places. There's a whole bunch of.
And I understand that, but my point is, if we're going from French is going away, hypothetically, I know that this.
Yeah, I don't know if we're actually saying it's going away, but yeah.
Hypothetically, if we're saying that's going away and we're going to replace it with German, there's got to be a continuation of, well, these kids have had the option, and now that's gone, and German is starting, and I guess that's more what I'm kind of asking about timelines. Does that make sense?
And I think you'd have to run them
Yeah.
together for a little bit until we have those, let's say it's German, we're hoping to still offer a second language, so French, let's say Spanish and a French. So we would still need to, if that's the direction we want to go, I would think we would run those introductory French classes while we build up how are we going to staff it, what's that curriculum going to look like, what is the resource, the tools, the textbook, those types of things. To answer your question, as a district-wide, the foreign language review cycle just happened, it was just completed last year, so they started it the previous year. So the way that falls out to look at that as a district won't be for a couple of years, but what Carrie is saying is if this is where we're going to go, we can do that in-house with the foreign language department at the high school to offer that as a new course, not necessarily review that as a whole as the world language. So in this particular stance, we would look at that through the high school curriculum review team, not the district-wide curriculum review, as part of our district-wide curriculum review cycle.
Sorry, same words, different group of people.
All right, so I think I heard some sort of consensus that we want you guys to investigate possibly teaching other languages today.
Other than French, you mean?
Instead of French, or French and.
Investigate, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that answers your question, right?
I think too, just to also point out, historically, we have watched as students are having to make the choices on what they can fit into their high school schedule, fewer and fewer kids taking this number of foreign language classes. So we're also, regardless of whether or not we offered French 1, 2, 3, and 4, we're seeing fewer kids taking those foreign languages. The other thing to remember is that all kids, everybody can take any AP test. So we have had students who can go and learn it someplace else. They can come back and they can take an AP test. They don't have to take the class with us. One of the things I would encourage you guys just to think about is what is it that we want to truly make sure that we offer for our students. We have to make sure that we're offering all the state requirements and what we have put down as our graduation requirements. And we have right now said that you don't have to take a foreign language. You have to take a foreign language, a CTE, a music, 2 credits within that. And then at that point, we're asking the students to look to see what college are you wanting to go to and what are the requirements for that college. But we want to make sure that students, obviously our 8th graders are not thinking right now about what college they're going to go to. So we're trying to get them into at least having the opportunity, if they're going to college, to think about taking 2 years of a foreign language.
And I agree that we probably should have an option of 2 different languages. I have no idea if French is the most common for those college entrance exams. I don't know what those languages are. Maybe Mandarin is the second most common versus Spanish. So I guess that would be part of your investigation as to whether or not to continue with French or what to do with that.
We're also gonna run into finding the teacher that is
Staffing.
certified in
Correct.
Mandarin.
Staffing is a
That's gonna be
challenge.
Incredibly difficult person to find, right, yeah, so.
And what is the research that we want to look at? Because there is research out there that says that French is the way to go. There's, I mean, depending on, yeah, so that's work that we will do in preparation for that next November meeting.
But if we gave the eighth graders a heads up, it wouldn't even close off French.
Correct.
It would just it would just put those options out there that we didn't feel like we put that out there without them knowing the
Correct,
possibility.
yes, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
How about a challenge? Why don't we offer 3 if we can, instead of just 2?
You can get part-time
If it's
teachers in a
feasible.
variety of the
And we have funds to worry about.
And I think just to remind you, there are many courses that are on our course book that we offer every single year. We just don't get enough kids to sign up to take them, and then we don't run them.
Yeah.
True.
All right, are we good?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so we will move, we'll move to J3, discussion and approval of 2019 tentative tax levy.
Yep, as we transition to J3, I know Dr. Fuchs is going to go to the presentation position and set up. But thank you to Patrick and the high school staff for coming out to answer those
you.
questions.
Yes, thank you
And it'll be
very
just one minute till Dr. Fuchs gets set up, and we'll get started.
Nice job, Patrick. We keep drilling you. Nice job.
Yeah, exactly, he's not off the record for that.
Oh, I am so tired today. Yeah, wish I could do that. Stretch. Can stretch this side, just not this one.
I was gonna say, she changed share passwords.
Yeah.
We still have 4.
You doing yoga over there?
4 must stay. You have to tag team.
Oh.
Oh, no. This might take several minutes.
All right, then get up and walk.
The blue screen of death, I see it.
No.
Seen that before.
Handouts like old school,
Yeah.
like
Or
whoever
something.
printed during the middle of that presentation. Did you hear that?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Somebody somewhere in the building was doing work and had something.
I was very impressed that he kept it together, just talked a little bit
Louder, didn't even
I
look
was
at
so
it.
distracted.
Oh.
It is chilly, yeah.
Are you cold in here?
Oh, I'm freezing, but it might just be me.
It is you.
Anybody like a water?
If you have no, thank you. If you have a fever, you can go over there.
I have no idea.
I have no idea.
Thank you.
I'm fine, thank you.
It's a little chilly, but you have a heavy coat on. You're looking.
Who's gonna be the person?
That'll work.
Did you just tell me to go sit in the corner? It's pretty hard
Are
to
we good?
offend me.
I am.
All
Do
right.
you want to wait for Aaron?
No.
No? Okay.
The other one, too.
So given the time it is, I will try and do the tax levy presentation succinctly because I know that all of you, yes?
You were just gonna answer what I was gonna say, I'm sorry. We've all heard it before, right? There's no, that's.
Yep, there's no new members. Both Aaron and Meg have heard it before. So let me take you through just a few highlights and we'll go from there. If all of you have a copy of the presentation, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But let me kind of just move along, okay? I think, let's see, go ahead, Fran, go ahead. Let me remind you, this tax levy that we're talking about tonight is to provide funding for the next school year, the 2021 school year. I think that is important. You all know that it's our largest and most stable and reliable source of revenue. Go ahead. Tax levy is about 76% of our entire revenue sources. It's, again, the biggest. State is next at 19%, federal at 2%. Go ahead. The EAV, if you hear me talk about it, the EAV is our equalized assessed value. That's important because that's what the formula is built on that the state gives to us. The EAV is the total value of all properties located in the Kaneland School District. Go ahead. Whoops.
We're good.
No. Okay. This is just kind of an FYI. Kaneland continues to be primarily residential at 79%. This is our total EAV history. Okay. Notice back up here in 2010 through 2014, our property values decreased. However, we are now in an environment where property values are increasing at a higher and higher rate each year. So that's positive. New construction is important. In the formula, you subtract it out and it artificially inflates the denominator, giving you full access to that new construction for 1 year, and then after that it rolls into the tax rolls. Yep.
Have you heard anything from Elburn as far as what they're doing with that new development? Because it seems like it's going up faster than they said it was supposed to, or you've seen any, heard any rumors of more new houses?
We had planned to meet with the village municipal leaders to learn that information. The meeting was supposed to be tomorrow, but it's being rescheduled. So as of right now, no, we haven't heard. The last I've heard, though, it's still planned to be a 20-year build-out. And so at this point, we are still feeling like it's okay. Additionally, take a peek at this. In 2018, our new construction was $11 million. Go ahead, Fran. Oops, never mind. Go back for a second. We're estimating $9 million for 2019. So some.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm tired. My brain's not working. It's not actually $9 million worth of house sales. It's right there.
New construction.
So $1 million houses is what we're planning on for next year?
$9 million worth of new construction across the entire district.
Are you asking if that's just an EAV, like it has, or if it's dollars?
It's not what the houses sell for. You don't.
No.
$9 million worth of real estate transaction.
No.
It's a different number.
Yes. It's their
equalized assessed value?
Yes, it's the EAV, the equalized assessed value.
I think that might be what you're asking.
Yeah, I gotta listen to make sure I answer properly.
What is that $9 million
Maybe I'm just.
equate?
I'm apparently not doing good tonight, so what I'm getting at is it's not $1 million houses.
No. It could be.
It could be. It's not the third one.
But it's probably not.
He's asking if it's the third, if it's the EAV, or if it's
the 1/3 value, or if it's actually $9 million. Yes, thank you. Say that again, please. What you just said. If it's EAV, or is it the actual
value
sale
of the
price of the house?
Or is it the third?
Yeah, I know what you're asking now.
Yay!
Thank you.
Yeah, I know what you're asking. Let me tell you in a minute while I think about it, just for a second, okay? I know exactly what you're saying.
Probably
Just give me
get to the
1 minute.
formula.
Yeah, just a second.
Thank you.
Yep. Go ahead, Fran. P-TEL, that's the tax cap. Remember, it does not cap an individual property tax. What it does do is it caps what the governments can ask for on an annual basis. We levy for dollars. The tax cap law limits what we can levy for as a governmental unit. Our limit is either 5% or CPI, whatever is less. This year CPI is 1.9%, so we will be using that. Tax cap counties hasn't changed. This is a chart to remind you how the CPI works with the tax levy. If you look at the very first row, we are using the 1.9%, which is from the 2018 CPI. CPI is your Consumer Price Index. It is an indicator of inflation in 2018. When do you levy that? In 2019, which is coming up, and it will affect our 2021 school year. So in 2021, we will fund that school year with the inflationary rate from 2018.
Which is less than it has been for the last 2 years.
Yeah, go back, Fran, sorry. The last 2 years, it's been 2.1%, and it did drop by 0.2 of a point. So thanks for pointing that out, Gail. Go ahead. Remember, we are in an environment where EAV is going up. When EAV goes up, tax rate goes down. It's an inverse relationship, and so you can expect your tax rate to go down because your property values are increasing. History summary, I don't think there's anything I need to really point out on there. We'll get to the estimates. Go ahead. These are the 5 steps that we use to figure out where we're at and how we're getting there. Go ahead. This is the formula to determine the limiting tax rate. The limiting tax rate is the rate that we are limited by with the law due to PTEL. And so that's the formula that uses the prior year extension times 1 plus the lesser of the CPI or 5% divided by total estimated EAV minus your new construction property values. Question? No?
I think on his question, the new construction, I think it is the actual value of the property, and this is where that factors.
And that is exactly where I agree with you, 100%.
You're a teacher, so I hope.
I know, that's why, I know. I'm like, my brain, it's 9:45, I gotta answer this question. Yes, I agree, it's a pure value. Yep.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. I guess that makes me think 9 million just seems a little light for all of the new houses in the district for 1 year.
It's based on when they sell.
Okay.
So if they're not done and they haven't closed,
And just based on the way that they're building that subdivision,
I know.
9 million's light.
yeah.
That's all.
I don't disagree. There hasn't been a whole lot of other places though with new homes.
Okay.
If you think about the district.
Well, Maple Park has seen some.
They've got some, but those are averaging what, 250 to 350?
Something like that.
Do you remember
Yeah.
off the top of your head, like if you had an extra 100,000 in new growth? I think we talked about this last.
It's a minuscule number.
It's small, right?
It's about 56,000.
Okay, so it's small, but it's just interesting to note. It seems like it could be a variety of numbers this year. I'm with you.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a bigger number there than 9 million in the long run, but it's not something.
But it might be.
That's the estimate that came in from the county.
Yeah,
So,
but I
yeah.
mean, still won't have that huge of dollars, but it.
You know, DeKalb was down by, I don't know, 50,000-ish. We don't get much from them. The majority of it comes from Kane County, and it was down. So, go ahead.
For clarification, the EAV and the tax rate going up and down, whatever, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a lower tax for the individuals.
That is absolutely 100% true.
Just wanted
In
to clarify.
fact,
People heard lower
Yep.
taxes, so.
No.
Just want to
Lower
clarify.
tax rate, but in a minute, I'm going to tell you that the typical homeowner will pay 1.9% more, which is your CPI.
Right. All right, just want to clarify.
Yep, thank you. And I've got some examples coming up. So these are the assumptions that we're using, the 1.9%. I am estimating an EAV change of about 6.8%. And again, new construction at about 9 million. We'll plug those numbers into the formula. You can see that formula right here with the calculation. So our tax rate will be somewhere around 5.31. Our total estimated EAV will go up to 897-ish million. And then we hope to have an estimated tax extension of about 47.6 million. Go ahead. The extension is what you get. The levy is what you ask for. The extension is what you get. So we think that will bring in about 1.3 million more in new dollars from this current levy or this current tax year. Typically, in order to balance our budget, we would need to limit our new expenditures by that 1.3 million. That assumes that your state and federal stay the same. If one of those goes up or down, you would need to adjust accordingly. Ryan?
By agreeing to the teacher's contract, we basically already did that, right? We know our
Expenses
the
are
vast
going up.
majority of our expenses are going up, so we want to be financially responsible. We're kind of committed already.
I would agree with that. Otherwise, you'd be looking at significant reductions somewhere else.
Thank you.
Go ahead. I did do a couple charts comparing us to other districts. This one is tax rates. We are the third highest tax rate there. The different colors are the different funds, so you can take a look at that. Go ahead. This is EAV per pupil. We're fourth in our comparison there. Yep.
I don't get a pain tonight. Can you go back to the last slide?
Of course.
I can't
see
read
colors.
in here or on there. So,
You know what? Yep, and I can send that out to you so that you can see color in there.
Well, it's just my eyes don't work that well. I can't see.
Sure.
But, all right, so you said we're third highest in tax.
Tax rate.
Are we third highest in population? I mean, is our tax rate relatively comparable to people versus other districts? Are we way out of line? Are we in the ballpark?
The tax rate basically shows which communities pay the highest in taxes.
Okay.
Okay? It's not based on population. What it's based on is how much money is contributed via the property tax. So that's what the first slide shows, our tax rates. What I'm going to show you next, though, let me go to the next slide, because maybe that's what you're looking for, and that's EAV per pupil. So EAV, again, is your property value, and this is per pupil. So this shows you the wealth of your community per pupil, which does take into account your enrollment or population. And we're fourth highest there.
Sort of. I guess what I was looking for is if we're real high in taxes, does that translate to a per pupil value? Like,
It does, and it's right here, this is the property value, which then you're going to get more taxes if you have higher property values,
but it's also going to be dependent on tax rate. So
which is the other one. And if you'll notice, we're positions 3 and 4. Let me show you one more chart that ties it all together. Go ahead. This one says, what is our operating expense per pupil? And the highest is down at the bottom here in Geneva. Again, we're number 4. So this fourth place position equates with our EAV per pupil. We're fourth in the position of EAV per pupil, and we spend fourth in terms of position where we are comparing to our comparable districts. So those should all tie together.
Does that also tie in how we educate? Our education numbers? As far
Like
as,
test scores?
excuse me?
Like test score type?
Test scores, is that translated to that?
We haven't done a lot of test score comparisons because they've been changing the tests for the past however many years.
But that,
So there's not a lot of, there's not a lot of comparisons.
it's a logical question. We have high taxes, we spend the money on the students, do we get the results?
Absolutely.
If it flows, I see your point, but that's a whole different ball of wax.
I understand,
Yep.
I had to throw it out there. 'cause
It
that's
is
what
a
people-
ball of-
That's
yep.
what people ask me.
No, that's a good question. And one of the topics we do have at our next board meeting are the update on the school report card and the indicators of success. So that would be probably a more appropriate timeline or venue to ask that at the next meeting.
Yeah, but they're associated to it.
Yeah, they are.
In the same, or you can associate.
And we used to do that, put them all together in February at the gallery walk. But again, they've changed the test such that we don't have any data or we don't have a lot of good data that compares.
I know that.
So-
I've heard that over and over as far as they change the test, but there's some consistency that we have here, and we
Yes.
have to take away that they
But
change the
Pedro-
test stuff.
Pedro, your question was, how do we compare?
Yeah, I
Well,
understand.
we can't, if they don't give us the data for the other schools, how do we do the comparison? I agree, we should be able to look internally and say we're getting better year over year or not, or whatever.
And we do
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
We do that.
But I wish there was the answer to your question, but there just isn't. I mean, we can't compare ourselves to Sycamore and say how you do if nobody's giving out all the information.
There's some, I don't want to get, we can get into details in the last time.
Next
time.
meeting.
It'll
Go
come
ahead.
as well.
So here's the bottom line in terms of the tax rate. Remember that your school district taxes are made up of two parts. One is the operating tax rate. That's what we do to operate our schools. It funds the education fund, transportation, operations and maintenance, and working cash. With that, in 2018, the tax rate was $5.57. In 2019, we expect it to go down to $5.31, a decrease of about 26 cents. Your bond and interest rate, that is to pay off your long-term debt. In 2018, it was $1.42. 2019, it's $1.35, or a decrease of about 7 cents. When you combine them together, last year's tax rate was $6.99. This year, we expect the tax rate to be $6.66, or a decrease of about 33 cents. So this is where you can expect your tax rate to be approximately. The reason why at this point I say approximately, please remember all of the assumptions that we're using tonight, except for the CPI, are built on estimates. We will not know the exact numbers until March or April. At that time, all of the tax appeals and things like that will be concluded. They'll give me a final number, and I'll be able to tell you your final tax rate. Go ahead. These are some examples of what if. So if your home is valued at $300,000, if that value stayed the same, your tax bill would actually go down, but we know that property values are going up. I used an estimate of about 5%, so you could see that at a $300,000 house, you could expect the school portion of your tax bill to go up approximately $360 on a $300,000 home. Go ahead. This is the calendar that was in the memo as well. So tonight, we need to approve the tentative levy. I can bring you updates if anything changes at the end of November. Again, I'm recommending that you hold a hearing and that we go through all of the truth in taxation. There's no reason not to give the public an opportunity to ask questions and or provide feedback. December 9th, then, we can have the levy hearing, approve the final levy, get it filed on December 10th. In March and April, we'll verify it. May and June, they'll send out the tax bills. In June and July, we'll start to collect the money. Again, it's the cycle. Ryan?
Oh, I was just thinking we get the tax money in two big chunks, don't we? Isn't it?
Typically in June and September, but we get some smaller pieces throughout the fall. We got a small piece in October, but they're mostly done. What you get later on are people that pay their bills late and things like that still come in. Yeah. But the big chunks come in June and September.
Julian, for clarification, as an example, that 305, 306, or 360, whatever that number that was.
Can you go back to the left?
Is that for a third of the population, or is that for everybody across?
For the rolling assessments, like how does that work?
Yeah, the assessment.
Yep, it's the rolling assessment like Shauna was talking about. And so each year, a third of the population is reassessed. And so I would say, yes, it's for a third.
A third of the people, if their homes were 300,000.
Yes.
Are going to.
And that's assuming that the assessors are caught up and they're on, on cycle and things like that.
I'm sure they are. So, thank you.
So, sure.
It does, I think that's a good point, though. It does make it confusing to people when they compare bills.
Very.
Because their next door neighbor might have a different story than they have.
And I think it depends on when you purchase.
Yeah.
So you get on a cycle.
And it just, yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes they do neighborhoods, sometimes I don't think they do. I think that they pick and choose. If you build a garage or add something, you'll get reassessed and then you get off cycle until the next round.
You get audited.
Yeah.
You get audited. Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's confusing.
So.
Yeah, because these numbers aren't for everybody. Yeah. Anything else?
Nope.
All right, so I think we have action
Thank you,
then.
Fran.
I'll entertain a motion that the Board of Education adopt the 2019 total tentative operating levy in the amount of $48,605,000. And is there a second?
Second.
And roll call.
Okay, Aaron?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Pedro?
As much as I hate it, but we already committed. Aye.
Shauna?
Aye.
Nick? And Ryan?
Aye, sorry.
Motion carries 6-0, so we will move on to superintendent report.
Yep, Dr. Fuchs took one of mine, which is the municipal leader meeting update. We heard back from a couple of the leaders that tomorrow's date that we previously scheduled didn't work, so we'll send out a doodle form and hopefully be able to conduct that meeting, because it is valuable, because that's where we hear a lot of the information of what's going on with new home starts, new home closures, restaurants, entertainment, any of those things that translate to our district. We can find out some of that information, also find out any enrollment changes or trends. So once we get that scheduled, we'll provide that update.
So you don't know when it's going to be yet?
Nope, not yet.
Okay.
I need to send out information tomorrow, hopefully. And then, as you know, the Illinois School Report Card is extensive and comes out October 30th. So you'll see that information, and as I shared with, or to Pedro a couple minutes ago, that will, is a primary agenda item for new business at our next meeting, will be the, some information from that, some information of comparables, and also the indicators of success will be at our next meeting on the 11th. And then lastly, on Wednesday night this week, we have our we have a foundation meeting at 7 o'clock, and Shauna has been our representative to that. So we'll have that meeting and provide an update at the next meeting for you. So those were the 3 updates I had.
I have a first quarter budget update for you. Aaron's passing them down. So in your board packets for the treasurer's report, I've included the new cover sheet, but I believe the board also asked for a first quarter report. I wasn't sure how you wanted it, if you wanted it consent, if you wanted it new business, and I didn't know if this is what you wanted. So I thought I'd start with this, get some feedback, and then whatever else you need. So on the first page, what I did is I took the categories that we talked about on July 9th in particular that caused us problems with this, not caused us problems, but helped to create the surplus. And I gave you an update on those specific areas. On the back side then, this looks a lot like your treasurer's cover sheet, but instead of just using the operating funds, it has all funds. And then that way you could have a bigger picture. So I guess ultimately what I would say at this point, the variances that you see budget to where we are, it's too early to tell if any of them are off significantly or not. Specifically in the salaries, I would be very careful to make any changes. You're at 23.7%. You should be at 25%, so it's slightly under. But in the springtime, you've got lots of things that happen, such as all of the committees get paid out. You have some more athletics that get paid out that aren't being paid right now. There are conferences from now until the end that get paid out for various extra hours. So I'm not inclined to change that at this point, but I think more importantly is this gives you an opportunity to know approximately where you are at so that you're not surprised at any point in the process.
So, building budgets, that one, building budgets is like supplies and stuff, right?
It is.
So that one probably is gonna run ahead of their 25%.
That's correct, because they bought a lot of stuff to get the school year started, and then they'll replenish it throughout the year as it runs out and things like that.
So that one we kind of throw out, that it's hard to, we expect a bunch in the beginning and, all right.
That's exactly right. I agree with that.
Special ed, it looks like you're 10% off. Does that one also run like building, or does that run more like salary?
That one is a mystery. That one runs according to when they bill us.
Which
You're
one are you
looking at
talking
the
about?
private transportation in particular?
Yeah.
Yep. So we are depending on them billing us. So right now, you probably only have one bill in there. You probably get another one pretty quick. I'm pretty sure we're using the services. Fran happens to be in the audience.
We're using the services.
Yeah, but we don't have bills yet.
When is that company gonna get straightened out?
That's it. I don't know. Question you can answer.
Who do I complain to about that we can't even get bills on a regular basis at the right time?
Nobody.
You just did, so noted. No, I don't know.
Should we just say noted and move on?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. And then the other thing is, remember when we bid, we pretty much take the lowest bidder,
Yeah.
and so they struggle. I believe is a good word, right? Struggle? Yeah, we struggle. So let me start with, is this format what you were hoping for, or is there something different? Let me get a little feedback on that.
I think it's pretty informative.
Yeah.
I
I
think,
like the breakdown.
yeah, I think further in the year, like some kind of conclusion is helpful or some kind of narrative, but I don't think you're there yet. You know what I'm
Okay,
saying?
sure, I'll put that right below.
Because I mean, I think your conclusion at this point is, it's everything seems to be on track to
Yeah.
you. The numbers aren't surprising, but if that was to change, I guess, just, and you probably would note note it if that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
I guess, I don't know what the magic number is either, but like if I flip the page over and I look at the top section under transportation, budget versus, current percentage of budget, received to date, oh, that's last year. But there's almost a 15% difference between this year and last year.
We got an extra payment from the state.
And that's what I was just, I don't know if it's 3% or 10%. When you get to a larger discrepancy between some sort of explanation, but I don't have a magic number of
Sure.
Right.
what that.
Okay. Got it? Thank you. Okay, then my second question is, do you want this in superintendent reports, new business, old business, consent? What? And I guess there is no old business, I apologize. Consent or new business?
I would like it in consent, so if I get nosy, I can pull it and ask questions.
Okay, we can do that in the future.
Does that go with everybody?
Yeah.
So I
Depending
guess
on-
clarification from Shauna's question then, if it's going to be in consent, then a narrative would be needed.
Well, or just if it's noteworthy. I mean, I don't need
Okay.
extra words if there's no reason to put them there.
Okay, so just
No.
some conclusions at the bottom, some bullet points.
If warranted, just if
If
warranted.
Right, if there's an outlier or there's something of note.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
okay.
And that
perfect.
was what I was going for too. is like,
Yeah.
Okay, this one's off, but here's
Just
why.
if warranted,
Yeah.
yeah, not for every number or anything like that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're
I mean,
welcome.
you gave us a guide at 25%, and we were able to see it real quickly. So
Yeah.
that's good to see. May I ask you, obviously you chose this, is there another flavor that you thought might have benefited us as well?
Not at this time.
No?
Thanks. Okay, so
We'll see this.
quarterly, right? Is that what you're thinking?
Quarterly, yes.
Yeah,
Quarterly?
so
Okay.
you'll see one in January. This one's just a hair late. I probably could have done it in October.
It is October.
It's still October.
Oh, good. I forgot. Thank you.
All right, any topics for future agendas? These are good.
I still, I brought this up before, I still haven't seen it. I would like to see something in reference to the bullying that happens that happens in our schools. And what I mean by that is to explore what we have, how we deal with it presently. Do we do stats? How do we manage that as far as to be able to see a potential trend, those type of things, because it happens. Let's be honest with it. And I wanted to see maybe plans on how we try to minimize it, if you will. And all I've gotten before was, when we come through policy, we'll see it. And that's not good enough for me. I'm sorry.
Is that something that's on a timeline that we expect, or is that something you'll come back to us?
I'll come back to you.
Okay, I think is that everyone, I think we've talked about, that's a good.
As far as the topic, first of all, I want to make sure there's consensus.
Yeah, I think there was, yeah.
Okay, good. Yep.
Okay. Anything else?
I think that sounds on the 11th, we're gonna get a lot more information about where they're at on standards-based grading and the implementation. Did I understand correctly what they hinted at?
Yes.
November 11th?
And so-
November 11.
All right, so I'll just wait that.
Yep.
My question was
Yep.
gonna be, how's the rollout going, where are we at, that kind of thing, but it sounds like that's all good. In the 11th, and also is the RTI versus MTSS, is that something that's gonna be part of the November 11th, or when is that showing up? I had no idea what you're talking about, so I think that was new information to the board.
That was a good pickup.
I will, I'll look at both of those, just in that, because with their school report card is more data-based, indicators of success more data-based, whereas MTSS, standards-based grading, Canvas, proficiency tables, I don't know if that fits in the same one, or if it's part of the same meeting, just a different business item. So that's what I'll try to determine.
Yeah, because it sounded, the way that I was reading between the lines, it sounds like MTSS could lead to some substantial changes in the way they're doing things, which I think I want to hear about before they actually do it. So-
Yeah, those are some of the initiatives that we're moving forward with. So that would be probably a different type of update, but it could still be timely.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Anything else? No? Okay, so we'll move to the second opportunity for public comment. Any public comment? No? So there is no executive session, so unless anyone has anything. Oh, okay, go ahead.
I'll move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.